I can have my council colleagues take their seats. Okay, we're going to get started. I think Mr. Majority Leader went out, but he'll be joining us momentarily. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Hi, Chief, how are you and your command staff? And to all of the audience members and members of the public, thank you for joining us, and all of those who are viewing at home this evening. This is a committee of the whole that I called for as Council President of the Court of Common Council. And the purpose of this COW is for the council to really engage in a dialogue with the Hartford Police Department, and specifically the police chief. As we all know, we have a new police chief. He's been on board 8 months now, since March of this year. And also we have some new council colleagues as well. So in light of new leadership at the police department, and also concerns that have arisen over the last month or so with respect to various incidents that have been reported in the news, the public as well as council has had some concerns. So we really thought this was an opportunity to take a step back for us to, again, engage in a dialogue with the police chief and your command staff, understand kind of some key categories that are outlined in the on the agenda this evening, including internal affairs complaints and disciplinary action, community policing model and engagement, officer recruitment and retention, professional standards, and training officers. And again, to engage in a dialogue to really better understand and hopefully in partnership move beyond this and how we can work together to ensure that our community is safe and our residents feel safe in their communities. So as far as the agenda, I will hand it over to the police chief to open it up and give us an overall presentation highlighting and hitting on the various points that are outlined on the agenda. The council will then engage in a dialogue and Q&A with the police chief and his command staff. And then we will open it up for public comment at the end of this. So we hope that everybody, excuse me, yes? Oh, okay. Mr. Majority Leader reminded me I should introduce all of my council colleagues to make sure everyone is aware of who's with me on the dais. So to my far right, I have Councilwoman Molly Rosado, Assistant Majority Leader John Gale, Majority Leader to my immediate right, Jimmy Sanchez, to my far left, Councilwoman Claudine Fox, and to my immediate left, Minority Leader Bermudez. We do have other members who will be joining us in momentarily. So with that, I will stop there, and again, I just want to make sure everybody understands the order of the agenda tonight. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Chief Rosado, and you can introduce who is with you at the dais as well.
Well, good evening, Council President Thames. Good evening to the members of the City Council and everyone who's present. Most importantly, good evening to the members of our community here in the city of Hartford. I'm humbled to be here tonight in everyone's presence. Just by way of introduction, we have a number of officers here who proudly enough reflect the community that we serve, a good, diverse group of officers here, many of whom have been promoted just recently last week to positions of leadership, and I'm proud to have them here with us tonight. So out of respect for everyone's time tonight, what we did is we took the agenda that was given to us beforehand, and we put a PowerPoint presentation together that will cover every topic that you asked us to cover tonight. Obviously, at the end of the presentation, should you have any questions, that's what we're here for. So without further ado, the presentation will be up on the board as well. If you take a look at the agenda, there were 4 topics that we were asked to talk about tonight. Right at my table, by the way, to my far right is Lieutenant Brian Balza, who serves as our Chief of Staff. To my immediate right is Assistant Chief Jason Thody, who oversees the administrative section of the police department. And to my left is Assistant Chief Rafael Medina, who oversees the operational component of our police department. So getting back to the agenda, there were 4 main areas that we were asked to look at. Number 1, first and foremost, our internal affairs complaint and our disciplinary process. We'll go into that. Our community policing model, officer recruitment and retention, and lastly, professional standards and training. Before we jump right into the actual agenda, I just wanted to touch upon the table of organization. And specifically with respect to accountability. One thing that I thought it was important upon coming onto the PD is to put in a system and a process where everything makes sense and there's a clear line of communication for the department and every member of the department. Prior to my coming on, there was an authorized staffing level at the top of 2. I'm not the tech guy, but I don't know if...
Is there a way to kind of zoom in on that piece?
So getting to the table of organization for the council's purposes, prior to my coming on, we had an authorized component of 2 assistant chiefs and 6 deputy chiefs. We were able to streamline that. Now what we have are 2 assistant chiefs and 4 deputy chiefs. And what you'll see on the table of organization is a clear administrative side of the shop and a clear operational side of the shop. So that's all I'm going to go into the table of organization, but I just wanted to put it out there and for your review. So the internal affairs complaints process. So I'm just going to dive into that right away. There's 3 ways that the department initiates investigations. A citizen complaint, an investigative file, that's where I as the chief authorize an investigation to be investigated. And then there's supervisor initiated, which is for the lower classification investigations where it's administrative sanctions within the PD. Citizens complaints, let me just dive into that for a second. So a citizen complaint process, as we all know, was touched upon in the consent decree, Cintron v. Vaughn, as to how we take investigations within the department when a citizen complains. So there's several different ways in which a citizen can make a complaint to the police department. A citizen can fill out an actual complaint form. There's a way where you can make a complaint over the phone, you can send it via email, you can write a letter, or you can even use a fax. We still receive complaints via fax. When a citizen fills out a complaint form, they can visit a number of locations to fill out a form. They can go right to our website. They can go right to the front desk at the Hartford Police Department. And there's other locations within the city, specifically at City Hall, in our Office of Human Relations, where a citizen is also available to come and complete a form. Lastly, there's the NAACP branch within the city of Hartford also has forms in which a citizen can move forward and make a complaint. It's available both in English and Spanish, which obviously is very important for obvious reasons. And all complaints, no matter what form, will be accepted and will be looked into. And that's an important point there. Within 3 business days of receiving a complaint, a commander of the Internal Affairs Division must ensure that the complaint is assigned to an investigator. The complaint must be forwarded to the Office of Human Relations, and the complainant will be sent a letter informing them that the complaint has been received, listing the name of the person who is conducting the investigation. So the next slide talks about the general responsibilities of an IA investigator. I'm not going to read each and every one of them, but it's pretty thorough, as you can see. There are several steps in an investigation. So when we receive questions pretty often as to why investigations take so long, this kind of outlines a procedure that an investigator must follow. There's multiple steps to ensure that the investigation is accurate, it reflects the facts, and it's a good quality report. So this will give you an idea as to some of the steps that our investigators are required to do. All citizen complaints must be investigated within 60 days. A 15-day extension may be approved for various reasons, and an extension beyond 15 days must be approved by myself or who's ever in the chief of police role. Each investigation is reviewed through the chain of command, with the final review being with the Office of the Chief of Police. And the burden of proof, for everyone's edification, if you will, is beyond the preponderance of the evidence, which is separate from a criminal investigation. As we all know, in order to sustain a charge criminally, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Administratively, in an internal affairs investigation, a standard is lower than that, and that's beyond the preponderance of the evidence. The best way to explain that, I've been told a number of times, is basically, is it more likely than not that the incident occurred? That is a standard that is used not only here in our department, but statewide and across the country. That's the standard for an administrative investigation. So there are several dispositions after an internal affairs is completed. The internal affairs investigator must come up with certain dispositions, and it's actually outlined in policy. It's either, the investigation is either going to be exonerated, unfounded, not sustained, partially sustained, or sustained. And the reason for those dispositions is outlined before you. Closing complaints. So when an internal affairs investigator closes an investigation, there's certain ways you can close it, either withdrawn by the complainant themselves, or it's closed at intake. In intake, it's an initial review of the complaint. The department records regarding the incident revealed no evidence of misconduct, and the complaint was closed administratively. And then there's other ways that you see before you as to how you can close a complaint. Moving on to citizen complaints, all complainants are notified by mail as to the disposition of a complaint. So in other words, if an individual comes forward to the police department and makes a complaint about whatever alleged conduct, after the investigation is completed, no matter what the disposition is, that complainant will receive a letter from our office advising them as to the results of the investigation and what their options are going forward from that point. To give you an idea as to the number of complaints that we've had over the past couple of years, if you look at this particular slide, it's an overview of citizen complaints filed against our officers. If you'll look, in 2014, there were 126 citizen complaints filed against the Hartford Police Department. In 2015, that went down a bit to 104. 2016, 81. 2017, 74. And year-to-date, we're at 43. So I think that sends a strong, powerful message that the culture at the police department is improving. That's a great trend, and that's not to be lost upon anyone. A breakdown of the allegations in 2018 for citizen complaints. Out of the 43 complaints that we've had, as you can see, 16 were for neglect of duty, 12 were for discourteous attitude, 10 were for civil rights violations, 4 for violations of code of conduct, and 1 for harassment. And it's important to note that those are allegations at that point in time until they're investigated, but those were the allegations. A breakdown now of the sustained investigation. So the 43 was what was alleged. As a result of these investigations, 5 were sustained, 3 for neglect of duty, 1 for a civil rights violation, and 1 for a violation of policy and procedure. An I-file, as I mentioned earlier, that's where I or someone on our staff identifies alleged misconduct by one of our officers, and I myself take action and initiate an investigation. If you look at the I-files that we have here, I-files typically involve allegations of off-duty misconduct, such as an off-duty officer arrest, or where there is potential for misconduct with no citizen complaint. It's the same process. There's no different process for an I-file than there is for a citizen complaint. All of the same steps that I talked about with when an investigation is initiated by a citizen. If it's initiated by myself, it's the same process. I'm going to skip over the supervisor-initiated Form 90. Again, those are the minor infractions within the PD. If you switch over to the where it talks about the SIRs, you'll see that the designated supervisor has 8 calendar days to complete an SIR. And again, that's a supervisory incident report unless there's an extension given. So even the SIRs, even though they're minor in nature, we still wrap those up as quickly as possible. So the disciplinary process. Disciplinary process, we get asked a lot, why can't we be quicker? Why can't an investigation be over and done within a day or two? You've seen some of the steps that we've taken as a department to investigate to make sure cases are done accurately. But once the investigation is done, there's another process subsequent to the investigation that takes place, and that's the right of the officer to either accept the charges against he or her, or to appeal them. Disciplinary process is based on a progressive discipline system. So basically what that means is if an officer is charged with one particular allegation of misconduct, if that officer is involved in similarly situated circumstances in the future, the level of discipline will be higher for the second and third time, and naturally even higher as it goes along if that misconduct continues. So that's what is meant by the term of progressive discipline. The discipline process is outlined in our code of conduct. We're prescribed as to exactly what we can do. It's not a process that is subjective in nature. We have to follow a certain procedure, and that's what this is here. It applies to all department employees, regardless of rank, whether it's the chief on down to a new recruit. We're all subject to the same process. And the codes of conduct are specifically prescribed within policy. So if there's a specific charge, it's outlined as to what type of discipline you will receive for the type of charge that you've been charged with, if that makes sense. So it's not like we can just make up a discipline an amount of time and discipline someone. We have to specifically follow what the code of conduct allows. And the next slide actually talks about the levels of misconduct and how they're classified within our code of conduct. So I'm going to skip along just in terms of for time, unless there's an objection. I just like to move on to the next category. These slides go on, but they're pretty. You asked about our discipline process. It's pretty in detail. It's there for your review. If you have any questions later, you can ask me about it.
Before you skip, can you just touch on the slide that just references the collective bargaining process and kind of how that, influences the disciplinary?
Sure.
Excuse me, we're going to have this, they're going to have it online for the public after we're done here.
Yep. Thanks, Council President. So pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement, the only time an immediate suspension without pay is when there is a violation of law. An employee has been arrested for a felony, a sexual offense, and/or a crime of larceny. So that goes to questions when, for example, if we have certain violations that do not involve an arrest or something that is outlined there, I am not allowed to suspend a person without pay without their due process first. They have to go through a hearing, so I can't take that action unless it's specifically outlined here.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions from the council on internal affairs before we move on?
Through you, President. Can you all hear me? Hi. Can you just briefly go over the disciplinary process? I'm not asking you to go through each slides, but
Yep.
just give me three
Sure.
bullet points of the
Sure.
disciplinary
Sure.
process.
So
Thank you.
there's an allegation of misconduct against an employee. Internal affairs investigation is completed. Charges are sustained. At that point in time, we have to look at what charges are sustained against that employee, look at the code of conduct, and see at what level they are. Once that determination is made, that employee is given an option. There's a range of discipline that we're prescribed to offer that employee. So should I choose to offer an employee the ability to accept the suspension at a lower amount, that employee can make that decision, or the employee can actually grieve it or fight it, if you will. So if the employee refuses the option, and now they're afforded an opportunity to move forward through an arbitration process. At that point in time, a hearing is scheduled. I have to give the employee a panel of 3 names where of higher ranked at the rank of captain or above. And that employee can decide who out of those 3 names will be the hearing officer for the hearing for the discipline. So he or she picks out of those 3 names, that person becomes the hearing officer. Corporation counsel then assigns someone from their officer to act as the presiding officer. And at that point, that is what we call our due process hearing, where the employee has an opportunity to come forward and give his or her side of what allegedly occurred and argue as to why or why not charges should be sustained. The department puts on the case via the department advocate, and the employee, through his or her representation, either through the union or his own counsel, puts together their case. Once the hearing is done, the hearing officer reviews everything before him or her, and that may include briefs, where both parties are asked to submit briefs to the hearing officer. That hearing officer reviews everything on a record and then makes a recommendation as to what, number one, if the charges should be sustained. Once they're sustained, what should be the level of discipline. That recommendation goes to my office, and at that point in time, I will make a decision as to what the discipline should be. A little bit point on that as well is if it involves a citizen complaint against the officer, that investigation then goes over to the Civilian Police Review Board, and they have a de novo review of the investigation, and they can make recommendations on their own and then forward those back to me as a recommendation. That's an overview of the process.
Thank you.
Mr. Majority Leader?
Thank you, through you, Madam President. Chief, at what point does the Civilian Police Review Board receive notice of the complaint, and are they giving ample time to respond prior to the closing of the case?
Well, once the case is closed, that's when the case is sent over to the CPRB, and they have the opportunity to interview the parties as well and look at the case all over again. That's done immediately, once the case is closed, not before the case is closed, but right after.
So if the case is closed, then how effective is the Civilian Police Review Board, their investigation is, how effective is that investigation going to be used towards that case if it's already closed?
So a couple points on that. The Civilian Police Review Board sits outside of the purview of the police department, so I have no control as to what they do in their hearings. That's number one. However, my understanding is that they have the ability to review all aspects of the investigation. They have the ability to hire an investigator to reinvestigate certain items that they may want investigated. They do their own separate investigation. They come to their own determination or conclusion. Then they send that back to me with a recommendation. But I have no control over it as to what goes on within that board. It has nothing to do with the police department.
Thank you.
So just to make sure I understand and clarify, it's not a simultaneous process. It's once you first, HPD first does their internal process, and then the CRB, the Civilian Police Review Board, does theirs, and then may kick back a recommendation.
That's correct.
Right, so I guess at that point in time, how is that, what is then the process internally for HPD to now take that recommendation from the civil, because they may say, they may substantiate it or what have you and say there's something here. So now what does that internal process look like if they kick it back to HPD?
So, again, so they have a review of the investigation, and once they send their recommendations back to my office, then I have the option of either, if they disagree with our findings, I guess that's the best example to give you, right? So if they agree with our findings, there's no further action taken. If they disagree with our findings, they may recommend that we take a look at something that wasn't investigated. We may take a look at whatever it may be, and we can make that determination whether or not there was a gap within an investigation that needs to be done, or it's just a recommendation. I don't necessarily have to follow that recommendation, but I can tell you within my 8 months, I haven't seen that.
Councilwoman Winch?
Thank you. Chief, how many complaints do y'all have to this date? How many?
Yep.
How many?
We-
I missed that in the presentation.
Yes, it is.
Okay. If you could just give me the number, you don't got to go
Sure.
detail since you did that already.
It's up to date, 43 civilian complaints against the
Okay.
department.
And did you also talk about the ones that are pending action? Did you
I'm
talk
sorry?
about the ones that are actually pending? How many are pending action before I arrive?
That's total what we have.
Okay. And so none of them have been acted upon? The 43 that you have currently, you have not acted upon any of them?
We have. There's 5 that have been sustained.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So just, Council President, so there's obviously a couple more bullets that we need to talk about on your agenda item, but this is just the first bullet on out of the 4.
Yes. I think the confusion was because there was still some questions with the slides that we wanted to skip through.
Sure.
So I think we got a little off track.
Yeah.
But yes, let's move forward and get through the slides, and then if people take mental notes, write down your questions, we'll deal with them at the end.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the community policing model and engagement. So community policing obviously is a central theme in our department, and it's something that we live and breathe. It's something that goes prior to my time at the police department. This department is well known throughout the state as a model of community policing, as a model of working with the community that it serves. And my job is to keep that going, and that's what we're doing. Our job is to maintain a positive relationship. We understand that at times we fail at that, and we will get better. We try to get better each and every day. But for the most part, there are a lot of officers here in uniform tonight. And there are a lot of officers out on the street right now in uniform that are serving the community and that care about the community, and that's going to continue. That is not to be forgotten. That is not to be forgotten. So some of the levels or some of the different things we do with our community policing, as everyone knows, all of our NRZ meetings, we have community service officers. We use a community service officer model for our community policing, and we have a CSO assigned to every particular neighborhood, and that CSO goes to every single NRZ meeting, stands up before the members of that neighborhood, and is accountable to the members of that neighborhood, and listens to the complaints, and talks about what's going on in that particular neighborhood. They talk about the stats that happened for that period of time, and they listen and they answer the hard questions. This is every NRZ meeting. I think if you talk to the boards of these NRZs, each and every one of them loves their CSOs. Every single NRZ I've been to, I've been told not to take away their particular CSO because they love them and they love the relationship that they have with them. That is heard in every single NRZ, and that's a credit to the officers. They take ownership in their communities, and they become a fabric of the community, and they work well with them. We attend community events, we attend community meetings, we attend block watch meetings, we work with our faith-based groups, and we also value our relationships with our corporate partners. That's important. They're part of our community as well. They mean a lot to us, and we want to make sure that we work well with every single member of our community. You name the organization, it's important for our relationship to continue with them. What are some of the things that our community service officers do? Well, recently through our promotions last week, accountability, Council President, you were there. I talked about accountability, Councilman Sanchez as well. Accountability is a central theme in leadership and in supervision. We were able to promote 43 individuals last week who will take on new leadership roles within the department, and each and every one of them have sat before me and the two chiefs, and they have listened to us talk about accountability. They took it to heart, and they understand what's expected of them. It's expected of each and every one of them as well as it is of me and the chiefs here before you tonight. One added improvement that I'd like to say is we had the city broken up into two districts, north and south, where we had one community service officer, lieutenant, who was responsible for the entire half of the city. And that's for all of our CSOs. I was attending all of our meetings, all of our organizational meetings. To have greater accountability and a greater presence, what we did is we broke it up into 4. So now we have 4 districts to lower the amount of space that each lieutenant would have to cover, would make them more accessible to the folks and to the community members. And I think that's a model that's going to work well. Walk beats. Walk beats are an essential part of community policing. Prior to my time here, walk beats had went away. I've been to like I stated earlier, I've been to a number of organizational meetings, a number of NRZ meetings, and again, another central theme was the walk beats. Now, our staffing doesn't allow me to put walk beats all over the city, but we were able to put 2 walk beats in the north end and 2 in the south, and they have been very successful. They're doing a lot of good out there, and I think it's reflected by what you see over what's happened over the summer. Knock on wood, we've been doing great over the summer. It's been, with respect to some of the major crimes, we've been pretty quiet. I know I just jinxed it, but we've had a good summer so far. And that's a credit to the walk beats, that's a credit to the initiatives that we've put together. We talked about our corporate partners. There's also a number of other organizations. There's faith-based organizations that we deal with. There's other initiatives. We have Compass. We work with a number of organizations, Aetna, Cigna, Travelers. our faith-based leaders, our churches, our schools. Everyone is integrated into our community policing model. Everyone is. No one is forgotten, and we talk to everyone that we can. That's what's important about this. With regard to the kids, we work with PAL, which is a successful program where we're taking young kids nowadays, we're keeping them structured, we're providing them mentorship, structured activities, we're feeding them, we're guiding them, and we're keeping them on the right path. And it's my hope that a lot of these kids that we're guiding through the PAL program will become officers in our department at some point. And we have seen that. So that's another example of our community policing model. There's another program in the South. It's called Hartford Alternative to Arrest Program. It's a model that is it's pretty progressive, and we're taking folks who need help, whether it be prostitution or panhandlers, and we're providing an avenue where we can provide services to that person. Instead of putting that person in the judicial system and making an arrest, we're trying to give them a separate option where they can seek help for whatever services that they need, so that we cure the root cause of what's causing the prostitution or what's causing the panhandling. It's a model that has had some successes, but it's not entirely successful because it's a model that's based on volunteerism, where the individual who you're offering to help has to step forward and accept that help. But when they're there under the leadership of then Lieutenant Powell, now Captain Powell, that program has been pretty successful. A couple of awards that we've received as a department. In 2016, Sign a Neighborhood Service Award was awarded to one of our officers for an outstanding work that they do within our community. 2017, the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association awarded another officer for their work in our community. I'm just citing a couple of examples, but these are just a couple of many, many awards that our officers receive day in and day out for the community work that they do on a daily basis. So the central theme of this is that, and I've said this over and over, we have a department just short of 400. There are just short of 400 officers out there who are putting their lives on the line each and every night, who are doing really, really good work, and who care about the community that they serve. Are we perfect? No. Do we need to improve? Absolutely. I'll be the first one to sit here before you and state that, and I'll take responsibility for that, and I'll make sure we get better. We're not perfect, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we have officers who are doing great, great work each and every night. I'm going to stop there for the community policing and engagement model before we move on to the next step. If you, Council President, if you have any questions on this. All right. So officer recruitment and retention was the third out of the four areas that you asked us to cover tonight. We have, prior to last week, we had one officer who's here tonight, Officer Kelly Bayerga, who's involved in our recruiting. Kelly, where are you? If you could just stand up for a second. Officer Kelly Bayerga is well respected within our city. She does the lion's share of the work for us on our recruiting. She's a member of our LGBTQ commission as well. She's well respected by, you name it, every single organization out there. We recently promoted another female lieutenant, Marisol, if you could stand up, who will be involved in recruiting going forward as well. We are committed to being diverse. We are committed to recruiting as many different folks from as many different walks of life as possible. And I just don't mean race. I just don't mean gender. I mean everyone. Everyone is welcomed into this police department, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's you name it. We welcome everyone, and that is the position that we take. We take recruiting seriously in our police department, and there are some things that we haven't done and that we'd like to take it to the next level. For example, we like to incorporate social media more into our recruiting. That's a way of getting messaging across to younger folks quickly, and it's cost effective. We've recently talked about tapping the colleges, and specifically the sports teams in colleges. There are a lot of minority candidates who play sports in colleges who are not all going to go pro, and many of them would make very good officers for our city. So that's an untapped source of candidates that we'd like to tap as well. We've talked about the PAL program. We have our cadet program that employs young people from the ages of 18 to 24. The cadet program, we keep these folks employed. They're city residents. The hope is to make them city police officers. We employ them as long as they meet each and every requirement that we ask of them. As soon as they reach the age appropriate for the academy, they're guaranteed a spot in our academy. And I have to say that we have a number of officers now who went through our cadet program, including one of our assistant chiefs. So it's a program that works, and it is a great pipeline for city residents to be police officers. One note on our, if you take a look at our website, you know, we had a recruiting poster that was the typical recruiting poster that you would see in law enforcement, but it was recently updated to reflect a department that's very diverse, and we are a department that's very diverse. It reflects an agency that shows leadership at all ranks, and we're really proud of that poster. So if you get a second to take a look at that, we're really proud of that. Some of the different areas where we recruit through a number of different organizations. We recruit through the Urban League, through Job Corps, True Colors, Aetna, our corporate partners. We visit Goodwin College. We visit fairs. Each and every day, we're talking to different people. We're visiting different sites. But just because I identified two folks in our recruiting unit doesn't mean that they're the only officers that recruit for the department. It's been my mantra that every single officer in this department, when they're in uniform or they have an interaction with a young person, that's an opportunity to recruit. A positive interaction will lead to a young person wanting to emulate the person they're dealing with, and we hope that turns into police officers. So every single interaction we have is an opportunity to recruit, and they're reminded of that each and every day. I'm going to talk some stats here. I'm sure you have questions about stats, so I'm just going to jump over to what our demographics look like. What page is that on? I can't see that. All right. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I've taken a liberty to give you before you. It may be small. I can't see the stats I have on my page, so I'm going to look up on the board. If you look at our department now, our demographics, we're approximately 39% minority in our department. And then if you look at the graph, it actually goes down and gives you a specific breakdown as to the demographics and the composition of at every level. And I can tell you that while it's not perfect, it's actually really good when it comes to diversity. And this is not innuendo. Sometimes there's rumors that we don't have representation, but these are the facts. The facts are our minority representation at all levels are going up. And if you look at, obviously, chief is 100%, assistant chief, it's 50%, minority deputy chiefs, 25%, captains, 40%, lieutenants, 33%, sergeants, 33%. I'm sorry, 28%, detectives 43%, and officers 40%. So while that's not perfect, it's pretty good. The last topic area that I'm going to talk about tonight is our training component. So the basic training program for each and every officer at the Hartford Police Department is 30 weeks long. Every recruit that comes through our academy that we put on is subjected to 30 weeks of training. It's various subject areas that I'm not going to go into, but they are required to pass at a percentage of 70% in each and every subject in order to be certified as a police officer. It covers the topic areas, runs the gamut from ethics to search and seizure, to patrol operations, to you name it, report writing, community interactions. It goes on and on and on, but it's pretty thorough, and it's also listed before you. Another point that I'd be remiss if I didn't state is that the state Police Officers and Standards Training Council regulates what is required of every single police recruit in the state of Connecticut to be certified to be a police officer. They set a minimum. Nothing prevents a department from rising above that minimum. Most departments, I would say, going out on a limb, meet the minimum requirements. In order to be certified, you have to go through 871 hours of training to be certified as a police officer. We provide over 1,000 hours of training, so we're actually more restrictive. We provide more training than's required. In-service training, so for the officers who are working already, each police officer must renew his or her certification every 3 years. Renewal is predicated upon the satisfactory completion of 60 hours of renewed training every period. 28 of the 60 hours are mandated in subjects. 32 of the 60 hours are in elective areas. Some of the subject areas, for example, are firearms, rapes, crisis, domestic violence, human relations, handling juveniles, police and the law, patrol procedures, gang violence, bigotry, and bias crimes. Those are just some of the examples. And with regard to the in-service training, just because some subject areas are outlined in this document, I can tell you that we're not required to follow that. We can actually determine the types of training on top of what you see before you to provide to our officers. And we adapt to what the issues of the day are and to make sure that each and every one of our officers is up to speed on the best practices with regard to training. For example, implicit bias. That's something that every single officer has been trained on, and that's something that we're going to continue. And with that, those are my remarks are concluded.
Thank you, Chief, for joining us and also for the presentation and overview of key areas of interest for the council. So at this point, I will open it up to my colleagues for a dialogue with the chief. So if anyone has questions, we'll start off with Councilwoman Wench.
Yeah, very simple question. Can we get the slides sent over to Council President so that we can get them and see them in adult readable
course.
slides? 'Cause
Of course.
this is useless. I can't
You know,
even see it.
I have to admit that I couldn't see this either, and I'm ashamed to say that. I don't have glasses, but I need to get glasses.
One slide per page. We can
I'm
see
getting
that.
old.
Also, the other thing for Ronaldo, are we streaming? 'Cause the screen is black. So we're supposed to stream, we're not. That's just two things, just
What are you-
comments.
excuse
I didn't
me,
have
what-
any questions.
What are you asking? What did you
No,
say?
I was asking if they were streaming, because are they supposed to stream out because the screen is black, and that they emailed the presentation to you so that we can print them out ourselves and we can read them.
I'm not understanding what you're saying. I'm sorry. Are you asking if we're
If we were streaming, right,
on public access?
right.
We are recording, yes.
Or it's recording, not streaming.
It's streaming live. It is
No, it's
streaming.
not. That's the
Is
question.
it streaming live? It's recording. We are
Okay,
recording,
okay,
yes.
all right. That was it.
Okay. Councilman Clark.
Thank you, through you, Madam President. Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I have a lot of questions. Starting off with officer recruitment and retention, slide 13. So that, you gave a presentation regarding the composition of the police department from 2011, and the comparison to the current composition of the department regarding the recent promotions, to me, is very appalling. Because of the fact that you talk about diversity, and I think that we have a disagreement regarding what actually diversity is. And so, can you just, for the sake of the record, explain why we have 0 black captains, 0 black lieutenants, 0 black chiefs that have been promoted during this recent round of 43?
So if you look at the facts, we did have a chief that was black promoted. And
With
I
all due
can't, I
respect.
can't make up candidates for you.
I understand that, but with all due respect, that particular individual was promoted when you first got here. So I know that she was added onto the list. My concern is that, and I've been saying this for a while, the reflection of the command staff does not, the makeup of the command staff does not reflect the city. And it's very concerning to me. And it's very concerning to individuals that have been outspoken about the police department and those that actually talk about the issues that they are experiencing. And I think, and I've said this before, that one way to address these issues, these systemic issues, is making sure that our police department is reflective of the community. And the only way that you can break down these barriers of the relationships between the police department and the community is making it appear that people can feel more safe and comfortable with approaching an officer.
Appreciate that, Councilman. So a couple notes. So as I stated, we promoted an African-American female deputy chief. We promoted a black lieutenant, and we promoted a black sergeant and a couple of black detectives. So just to put into perspective what the process is, there's a process that has to be followed when there are promotions. So I just don't promote people by snapping my thumbs. There's a written exam, there's an oral exam, and then there's an interview process. Once each and every candidate applies, they're objectively graded, and they're put on, and this is a process that is outside of the police department, where we hire a vendor who does the testing. Each and every candidate has the opportunity to apply for promotions at their next higher rank. Once the process is completed, there's an eligibility list, a certified list that's provided to me, and I go down the list for the promotions. So I think it's unfair to say that there were no African Americans promoted when there were. I think it's unfair to say that there were no African American lieutenants promoted or sergeants or detectives. We have a very diverse department. Do we have room for improvement? Absolutely, we do. But remember, I can only pick from the candidates that actually apply. What we can do is be better at mentoring more younger officers, and that's something we're working on, and that's something that I'm committed to working on, is to mentoring and encouraging more officers of color to put in for a promotion. I can't force a person to take the test, but I can mentor them and encourage them and show them that there is an opportunity for them to move up, and if they do well, they will be recognized.
So, just for the record, let me back up. I mentioned the fact of command staff, not detectives. So do you consider detectives as part of the command staff?
I consider detectives a promotion and an honor for an officer to rise to the level of a detective where they're doing great work each and every day. That's a position of pride, and it's a position of leadership within the department. There's no one rank more important to me over another in the department. Every single officer means something to me, and one officer's dream may be to be a detective, and that's what they strive for, and that should be recognized.
And I agree with that, and I was not belittling anyone from being promoted to a detective. I'll go back to saying regarding command, because you just separated the city again, so your lieutenants are covering the areas. And so the lieutenants are the ones that are in charge of specific things, and they follow the chain of command. That's my primary focus there, from the rank of lieutenant and up. Going back to, yes, I understand, we all know regarding the promotion of a deputy chief, and we are all well aware of this particular issue. My concern is the fact, again, that it's not a true reflection, because now that there is a void. And I know I would like to know, and many would like to know, what will be the plan far as to fill that void, because you obviously, at your discretion, selected your assistant chiefs due to some conversations. And so therefore, at your discretion, you select deputy chiefs as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So since these command structures are at your discretion, one would like to know what the process that you go through to handpick your assistant chiefs and your deputy chiefs. Is there some type of description that you follow? You mentioned within the snap of a finger. Does it happen within the snap of a finger? Is there years of service? What type of credentialing that you set as a criteria in order to select the people that fall under you?
That's a great question, and there is. So I take a holistic look at each and every candidate, and that entails their education, their work experiences, their accomplishments, their leadership, what have they done, their skill set. And I also take a look at, and if you remember from day one when I started this job, I've always said I am looking to match a round peg with a round hole. I'm looking at folks who are skilled in a certain area, and I'm trying to plug them in for the good of the department and the good of the city into a specific assignment. So if I have an opening in an operational component, I will take a look at all of my candidates and see who has the strongest operational experience, who has a certain amount of leadership, who has what education, what professional development, what type of training. There's not just one factor. And I also do look at race. I think absolutely it's important to have a department that reflects the community it serves. That is absolutely one factor amongst a number of factors. That is not the only factor. There's so many different factors that I take into account. If it's an administrative position, then I will see who has demonstrated to be the most administratively proficient person in the department at that moment in time. And that is the person that will benefit the city the most. That is the person that will benefit your community the most, because they will be more effective for the department and more effective for the city.
How far did you go back into a person's record if for consideration, their file?
I look at the entire record of each and every candidate before me.
Okay. Is there a certain time frame that you go back?
Again, I look at the entire record, everything that's before me.
So you go back to the beginning, all the way up to the current. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Sure. So you look back, you look at what their education is. You know, what type of assignments have they had?
More so specifically their personnel record. That's what I'm getting at.
That's another component of it, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Where are we at regarding compliance with Cintron v. Vaughn in regards to recruitment and retention and promotion?
So that's what I just talked about.
I'm sorry?
I said, that's what we were just talking about. I mean, is there something specific about recruitment that you'd
Yeah.
like to talk about?
Where are we at far as the compliance for the consent decree? Are we at 50%? Are we at 75%? Do we have specifically where we're at regarding this consent decree?
So we're at 39% minority representation in the department. I broke down the categories by rank on our representation. But listen, there's always work to be done. Again, I'll say it over. We can be better, and we're going to be better, and we're going to try to be better. That entails mentoring younger officers. We have a very young department. We've lost a number of officers due to retirement, as you know. But we have, so the mayor, as well as your council, has been very supportive of supporting the police department and getting classes in. We've had, as you know, two classes graduate already this year. Both classes were over 50%. We have 2 classes in now, thanks to you and the mayor, and both classes are over 50% minority. 50% minority. That is unheard of in law enforcement. That is what I call progress.
So since I'm a Hartford guy and I promote Hartford residents, breaking that down, how much does that equate to Hartford residents?
So our minority representation for Hartford residents is out of 16 in the class, I have 1. But I also have minority candidates from outside of the city that will serve the city just as proudly. But we can do better. Again, when we're falling, I will tell you we're falling and we can improve, and we're committed to improving. But we're doing the best we can, and again, we have 2 classes in Academy now that are over 50% minority. That's something that everyone in this room should be proud of.
My last question for now, it's been two people staffed for recruiting for the entire city, was down to 1, now it's back up to 2, which I'm happy to see. Is that a sufficient amount for recruiting for an entire city, capital city? And do you have plans to beef that up?
Right. I could always use a lot more people, believe me. Right now, we're at 379 officers. We have these classes coming out soon. As we roll out more classes, I hope to beef up specific units, and recruiting is certainly one of them. But we have so many pressing needs within the city to keep our community members safe. So we have to be very smart with where we put our personnel. It's a constant battle, but these 2 folks are not sitting and recruiting by themselves. For example, we have now in PIO, we have an assistant chief who's doing double duty by being a PIO officer, but I've also identified a young Hartford resident, 6 years, 7 years on the job, African-American, who's our social media officer for the department. He's here in this room today as well, and he will assist in recruiting. So we have a ton of officers who are doing double, triple, quadruple duty on top of their normal duties. So just because you see 2 folks full-time in recruiting doesn't mean that they're the only recruiters. We have a lot of folks who are involved in the recruiting, to answer your question.
No, I do have to commend you on that point there. I give credit where credit is due. Please always remember that, because I was at the Get Hired Hartford's job fair with my employer today, so I did see Officer Bayaga and also Officer Jenkins there as well. So thank you for supporting that event. My final question is, where do you see the police department within the next 5 years?
I see a progressive police department that is utilizing technology to its best potential, that is engaged and is seen as a national leader in community policing, who values transparency and accountability, and who acknowledges the good and the bad, improves the bad, and improves the good and make the good even better. It's a diverse police department. Again, that's reflective not only in minority representation, but in all aspects. Young, old, you name it. Progressive, conservative, you name it. We're going to be a diverse technology-driven, open and transparent police department.
Councilman Fox?
Hello. I have several questions, but I will try to work through them as quickly as possible. My first question begins with the form that you gave us regarding the citizens' complaint form. And so I noticed that you asked several times for the complainant's race and ethnicity. May I ask where that information goes when it's logged? Is there a file that's put together? Just curious about what happens with that process.
So I'm not sure exactly if we retain it. I don't think we retain. It's just on the form itself so that we have an accurate accounting as to who made a complaint and why. But I don't know, I do not believe that that goes into a repository where we keep that information.
Okay. Next, still regarding this form, when folks are filling out the paper form, they need to provide the badge number of the officer. What happens if the officer refuses to provide their badge number? Is the paperwork still completed and filed appropriately, or?
Absolutely. You know, first of all, an officer should give their badge number, but if not, there's ways that we can identify who the officer is. That would not preclude the complaint from going forward.
Okay. Next, still on internal affairs and complaints, you gave an overview of the number of citizen complaints, and I had a question about when those numbers are logged. Like, at which point are they logged? Are they logged regardless of whether or not the complaint is sustained, or do they only get logged when the complaint is sustained?
No, they're logged right at the outset.
Okay.
At the outset.
So then next, I'm moving on to professional standards and trainings of officer, because I'm a training facilitator by nature. And so I know you listed, briefly gave an overview of the trainings that our officers are required to go through, and you mentioned implicit bias. Can you tell me what topics are covered within the implicit bias training?
So the best way to look at it, we use the Dr. Lori Friedel's fair and impartial policing model. It's on the web. She's out of the University of South Florida. She was actually mentioned in the President's 21st Century Policing Report. We went out and retained her about 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, trained the entire department. We also invited surrounding departments to come in, because we know that our residents sometimes will cross city lines into other areas. We wanted to be inclusive. Invited other departments in for that training as well. That talks about the difference between explicit and implicit bias. It talks about delinking and how we can not necessarily, we know that we can't remove bias from people. They're ingrained over years, but we can delink in decision making. It talks about legitimate police legitimacy, and it basically gives our officers instruction on how you can go into a scenario and let people have their voice and make decisions based on facts, not any preconceived notions. That's the general summary of the training, but it's online and it's got a great description on there if you'd like to see it.
Oh, great, thank you. And then just a question, since you're using an online module, what further steps are taken within the department to address maybe real life situations that have occurred, to kind of link these discussions around implicit bias, engaging with the community with maybe real life things that have happened? How often do you visit situations that arise with your officers, and is there actually space to talk about it and debrief and figure out what to do better next time?
There is every day, to answer your question. So there's roll call trainings that our supervisors are providing to the frontline officers before every shift, and they're talking about incidents that occurred the day before, a couple days before that, and the issues of the day, as you stated. That's just one of the components, but there is also our annual in-service training where we're training 5 times a year at a minimum on various subjects within the department. So it's a continuous process that doesn't stop. And then the third part of that is if for any incident that is a very, of importance, very significant incident, there's a process known as an after-action incident review. And basically, immediately after a significant incident, officers will get together and talk about ways to improve, what actually happened. Are there any secondary trauma effects to the officers involved? Are there any gaps that need to be covered? That's the immediate after-action incident review. And then we can actually develop that into a more in-depth after-action, into a report, looking at an overall incident and learning issues where the department can do better.
Come on. Thank you. What community policing model are you using, and what training specific to community policing do the officers receive?
So we use the community service officer model, and that's where there is one community service officer assigned to every neighborhood through 17 neighborhoods in a city. And again, the training is continuous. We provide specific training to the CSOs, professional development training through either the state police academy, or there are times when there's other organizations. For example, one is called PERF, which stands for the Police Executive Research Forum, and there's also an IACP training organization, and that stands for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, that puts on training as well. And then there's other higher ed trainings that are afforded to our officers, either through the FBI National Academy or through the Hartford School. There's a program down in Louisville, Kentucky, through the Southern Police Institute. So there's so many different ways where our officers are afforded training on a continuous basis.
Thank you. Are school resource officers included in those trainings?
So we do not have school resource officers. What we have are the CSOs who cover the schools within their neighborhoods. We have so many different schools that there's no way our personnel staffing would allow us to have an SRO in every school.
Final question. You mentioned when you were talking briefly about the, what was it? Discipline process, where an officer has an opportunity to select among 3 captains about who is going to basically review their case. What policies, protections, whatever, are in place to ensure that an officer isn't selecting a captain that might have favoritism towards them? Are you reviewing to make sure that there are no links between that officer under question and the captain? What happens there?
No, that is a really good question, and we do. It's a review. Well, first of all, that's dictated by collective bargaining, that we have to offer this process to the officer involved. There are times when, so the candidate pool just before last week was very limited. We didn't have captains. We didn't have, we only had a select number of people that a person could choose from. But there is, to the extent possible, there's a screening process to make sure that there's not a personal relationship or an existing animus between 2 employees. You don't want, you want the hearing officers to be as objective as possible. But the point is for the person who's subject to the discipline to be able to make that determination so that he or she can pick someone who is not either tainted by some sort of history.
Sorry, one more question, just to kind of reiterate something that Councilman Clark asked around the history of complaints or what's within a officer's file, and the impact that that has on promotions. I'm asking this because, as we've seen and we're dealing with right now, considering the Officer Barone, it has been shown multiple times that there were, instances where he had been reprimanded or received some kind of mark on his personnel file, but still was able to move up in the ranks. What are you doing to address that, to ensure that doesn't continue to happen in the future?
So there should be an entire review before someone is promoted. For example, we just had promotions last week, and what we did was, we look at the entire record of that individual employee. We actually get a printout of what their discipline history is. That's one factor that's reviewed. We talk time and distance, how long ago that happened, what type of discipline, if there is discipline on the record, what type of discipline was it? Was it a failure to supervise, or was it an administrative oversight or something to that effect? So the charge itself, if there is a sustained charge, is relevant. How long ago it happened is relevant. Has that officer been productive subsequent to that discipline history, if an officer does have discipline? Because the purpose of discipline is not to be punitive in nature. The purpose of discipline is to correct behavior. And if you can make a determination that behavior has been corrected and there's a certain amount of time that has elapsed, and that officer has been a productive member of the department and of society and our community, then that officer deserves an opportunity just like any other officer short of discipline.
Thank you so much.
Minority Leader. Stay over here.
Through you, Council President. Thank you so much, Chief, and for everyone who's here, the residents, and also the men and women who you risk your lives every single day. And so we respect that, and we thank you for that. You have a very difficult job. So I have a lot of questions, and I am going to get through some of them. But I also want to allow for others to ask questions as well. So just bear with me. Okay. So on page number 3, in terms of the internal affair complaints and discipline, you've provided us with an overview of citizen complaints, starting with 2014, 126, and then scaling most recently to this year. And Chief, you mentioned that the culture at the police department is improving. We recently had, last week, a community conversation for everyone, for Hartford residents. And at this community conversation, it was a spectrum of folks who were here. We had individuals from the community who expressed their gratitude towards the police department and are very appreciative of all the work that you do, and are very happy that you're providing a service to protect. But as part of that community conversation, out of the 65 attendees that we had, the majority of the folks that attended that are Hartford residents, well, all of them were Hartford residents, and I'm gonna read from the notes that were taken, because there were notes at this event. The general sentiment was a feeling of distrust and fear between community members and the police. And the community wonders if the police also distrust and fear the community. That was one of the things that was highlighted. There were also other items on there. And so as the community mentioned this overall feeling that they had towards the police department, another theme with that was the feeling of having to cower down or literally belittling one's spirit and oneself of self dignity in order to even approach a police officer. And so wondering, with that question, wondering what is the department doing to help that perception from both sides?
So our department is working hard each and every day, interacting with all walks of life in our community each and every day, doing good work each and every day. I'm also a Hartford resident, and I go around the city while I'm working and while I'm not, and each and every day someone comes up to me. You know, you make remarks about the certain sentiment, and I understand that sentiment exists. But there's also another piece of that where a large majority of our community says, you know, we support what you guys do each and every day. We know that you're doing a great job, and we support you, and we're here for you. I hear that in every community I go to. I hear that in every organization I go to. So it's important not to forget that. It never fails. Each and every day someone comes up and says that. Now, when we drop the ball, that is my responsibility, and I would urge you to place the blame on me. We can be better, and that is something that I humbly tell you that absolutely we can do better. Any organization that tells you they can't do better is an organization that's lying. We're not perfect, but we recognize when we fall, and we get up, and we keep moving, and we keep working, and we keep serving the members of our community. Let me tell you something. Each and every officer here today, they put their uniform on today because they're proud to wear their uniform. And I think that's important. Let's not lose sight of the fact that there are times when they're attacked physically, verbally, you name it. They're spit at. Each and every day, they still put that uniform on. They still put that uniform on, and they still put that name tag on that shirt, and they wear it proudly because they're Hartford police officers. And those are the ones that I'm going to go to bat for. So if you want to blame someone, you blame me. I'll take the credit. I'll take the heat on that. But please, the officers that are here before you tonight, there's officers on the street right now that are patrolling right now in your neighborhood and everyone's neighborhood, keeping your family safe while you're sitting here. Let's not lose sight of that fact. We're not perfect. We're not perfect, and we're going to get better, and I'm committed to that.
So, and thank you, Chief, because, again, I do want to state, you all have a very challenging job. You see the worst of humanity at cases, in the worst cases. And we respect the work that you do. You all do a very honorable work, those who are very committed. In terms of the culture at the police department, do you believe that it is improving?
So we had a promotion last week where we promoted 43 individuals to leadership positions. And in my remarks to those folks who were promoted, I think anyone who was there can attest to this. I stated to them, today's a day for new leadership. Today's a day that we can right that ship and get better. That is a work in progress. We're not perfect, but we're also not all bad, right? We're an organization that, we've had some missteps that we all know about. We can't hide that. But we're going to keep moving. And the way we do that, to answer your question, is to keep talking, to keep training, to keep being accountable to our community members. Our officers are still engaging the community. They're still going to NRZ meetings. They're still visiting the schools. They're still working with the kids at PAL. They're still working with the kids with the Explorers. We're still responding to calls. When people are in need, we're still showing up. When there's a fire, we still show up with the fire department. When someone falls, we're still there to pick them up. We're still continuing to talk to each other, to get better, to train. There's training that we're providing to our officers. Our officers are encouraged to keep up to date on their training. That's how you change the culture. And again, that's from me on down. We're accessible, we're talking, and we will engage as many folks in our community as possible. You know, one of the things that I've been doing throughout the past weeks is talking to as many people as I can, as you know, you being one of them. We're receptive. If you have thoughts as to how we can improve, that's why we're here to listen. And we're never going to stop listening. But there's still good stuff going on in the department and within the city.
In reference to the police civilian review board, You mentioned, Chief, that after the recommendations are set, that you would decide, it's up to the chief to decide what will happen in terms of following that recommendation or not. Is there, under your leadership, do you have any plans to share the results of what happens to those recommendations afterwards?
Absolutely, I mean, anyone would be welcome to that information.
Okay.
So again, just to reiterate, the workings of the CPRB fall outside of our jurisdiction. So I would encourage you to ask that question of the chairman of that board and ask them if they would be willing to release their information, because I don't control the information that comes out of the CPRB. That would be up to that particular body, which is, again, independent from the police department.
In reference to the internal affairs and complaints and discipline, on one of the slides on page 4 of the PowerPoint, it says, typically a supervisor initiates their own investigation with personal observations such as an officer being late, et cetera, et cetera. What happens, you know, officers have a very strong bond. You see a lot, you go through a lot. Same is also true for the fire department. And so what happens if an officer or anyone in the field is heading in the wrong trajectory and it is witnessed by others? Is there room for confidentiality and not having the ratting out person?
Yes. You know, each supervisor has a responsibility to look out for the well-being of the officers that they work with. If a supervisor recognizes, or even another officer recognizes that one of his or her colleagues can use help, they can talk to that officer, they can refer that officer to our officer wellness program. We have an officer, Teresa Velez, who works with that full-time, and she's very discreet. We have an EAP program that offers counseling to our officers on a confidential nature.
And is that inside the actual building or
No,
outside?
so that's an outside vendor that handles counseling services, whatever services that are needed for that particular person, and that's absolutely in confidentiality. So there's mechanisms in place where an officer who needs help can and will receive it in a confidential manner.
Also on the internal affairs complaints and disciplines. So you reference administrative oversight as something there's different sectors here. So if someone like, say in this example, Sergeant Barone, who was able to receive a promotion to a sergeant, even though there was misconduct in his file, and I know you've mentioned this before, but just for clarity for those who are here and also who are tuning in, why was his previous misconduct not counted against him to become a sergeant?
So a couple things. First, I do not want to talk about a specific officer who's in the middle of a hearing process
Fair
to
enough.
violate his due process. But I can tell you that I can't answer for folks who sat in my seat before me. I can't answer about what I do. Again, as I referenced to Councilwoman Fox, I will look at the entire picture of the officer when it comes to times for promotion, look at how long ago the incident happened, what were the circumstances of the incident, were they sustained or not, what is the track record, and so on and so forth. There's so many factors. In law enforcement, officers who have discipline in the past get promoted every day in this country. We all make mistakes. I have made mistakes in my career, and if I held myself to the standard where only a perfect officer could be promoted, I would not be sitting here before you today. That is, everyone has an opportunity to improve and do better.
So would you be willing, Chief, to lift the veil on the 6-month period? It was my understanding that in various cases, the department would only look at information of misconduct within the 6 months of said misconduct, following the misconduct.
Okay, so I have not personally heard of that. I look at the entire record of an employee when I make a determination whether or not the employee is going to be promoted.
Out of the 409 officers that you brought up in our last budget presentation that we have, and now you just recruited a new class, which is great. So we thank you for that. 6% are Hartford residents. And why is it that the new recruits or those who are interested that are from Hartford are not making the cut?
That's a difficult question to answer, to be perfectly frank with you. There are multiple challenges out there. I can tell you that, and maybe Officer Baerga, if she'd like, she can speak on this as well. We make additional efforts, if you will, accommodations for Hartford residents to get through our process. For example, you have to pass the physical agility exam with a certain passing score in order to move on in a process. Now, normally the way the process goes is you get one bite at the apple. If you fail, you're out of the process. And that is the process for any non-Hartford residents. We do make an accommodation now for Hartford residents. Should they fail their physical agility on the first try, we give them additional opportunities to pass that, so long as they pass before the initiation of the academy. And that is something that we do for Hartford residents to encourage and to help the process along. That's one specific example of how we make accommodations for Hartford residents.
Okay, just going through the slideshow. There's been some officers and employees. Oh, actually, circling back on that, are there background checks or credit scores that are also part of the process?
Yes.
Has that been a barrier for Hartford residents?
Background checks are part of the process. Credit checks, depending on an individual circumstances, can and will. So law enforcement, in law enforcement, an officer has the potential to deal with large sums of money at times. So I think a very fair factor to weigh is someone's credit. However, it's not. It doesn't preclude a person from joining the police department because they have bad credit. We recognize that, folks nowadays have a number of circumstances that causes one's credit report to go down a bit. Everyone nowadays, it seems, has student loan debt. We're not going to hold that against someone because they're trying to further their education and they have a high amount of student loan debt. To answer your question, we look at each and every applicant individually, and we look at each and every file. Every applicant by law is required to go through a background check. That's not something that we can just make go away. That's a requirement from the state oversight committee, from Post. So that is something that we do, but we look at everyone individually.
Okay. On slide number 13, officer recruitment and retention, I know it's already been mentioned, but it was really hard for us to be able to read that information. So you'll be sending that to us in a bigger font size. But on that particular graph, would you be able to send us a comparable you coming in versus how it was before, so that we can have a better understanding of how we've...
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then, in reference to the professional standards training, so It is my understanding that in terms of training, there's only 2 hours that's provided of morals and ethics training per state law. What gaps do you see in terms of having more assistance from the state delegation to be able to provide, whether it's that or other trainings?
So I wouldn't say there's a gap. We have an opportunity to address the gaps in training, not only through the state police academy, but as I stated earlier, there's multiple organizations out there that we can utilize. We can bring in subject matter experts in various subjects to train our individuals, to train our officers. And as a matter of fact, we have done that in the past. And it's something that we've discussed very recently as well.
So at the last council meeting, we voted, certain council members voted to approve reimbursement of $60,000 for, well, going to the fusion centers. Can you explain a little bit more about how the fusion centers operate and what the role is of the Hartford police officer who's assigned the liaison to a fusion center, and what impacts does that have on the undocumented community in Hartford and as well as activists?
To answer your last question first, there's no impacts on those communities. So what our officer is, he's what we call a RILO, which is a resident officer, or resident liaison officer for the region. The way the Fusion Center works, that is outside of the Hartford Police Department, every state is mandated by federal law to have a fusion center. And basically what a fusion center is an intelligence gathering unit that protects the state, that disseminates information to law enforcement statewide on relevant topics, whether it's homeland security, whether it's ATM skimming, you name it. And it's basically an informational dissemination unit. They are not allowed to actually investigate. I oversaw the State Fusion Center in my time with the state police, and I can tell you that the folks who are assigned to the Fusion Center do not investigate. All they do is gather information and disseminate it to law enforcement.
So on that, we did a little bit of research and we found that at the federal level, there have been arrests made against undocumented individuals because of Fusion Center findings. But bringing it closer to home, we've personally seen activists who've been targeted for Fusion Center activity. But I do have another question. So again, officers have a very difficult job. There's a lot of PTSD, a lot of things that come up. There are many situations that you have to deal with that most people would not be able to consistently go out there and handle on a day-to-day basis. And so what is being done to make sure that officers are, their well-being is taken care of, and there is an opportunity for them to have debriefs and to be able to de-escalate, if you will, from certain cases and situations that they have to deal with on a daily basis?
Thank you for that question. The answer to that runs in so many different ways. There's so many different ways that we have to look out for officers in general within the police department. It starts with effective supervision right off the bat with a sergeant and an officer. It starts with constant communication to get to know the officers, get to know about who they are, who their family members are, what their personal lives are like. That's what makes a good supervisor. We recently had sergeants promoted, and I had a discussion specifically about that with these first-line supervisors. I said to them, listen, what makes you a great supervisor is to get to know the people that you work with. You know, find out if they have kids, what their interests are, get to know them and really care about them. And when you know a person, you also know when they're not right and when they need help. It starts there. It starts in wellness. We have, as I stated earlier, we have an officer who's dedicated to educating the members of our department, whether it's training bulletins, whether it's private conversations. Teresa Velez is phenomenal in that. We all know her. She walks around the department, and she generally cares about the officers, and she asks you how you doing. It also goes to exercise, and we have a gym in our police department. It's there for a reason. Officers have to be able to maintain a balance in their personal lives as opposed to their working lives. It's our work with our faith-based groups that come in. We have a chaplaincy program that's very vibrant. We have some amazing chaplains who come into our police department on a daily basis and just talk to our officers and ask them how they're doing. They really care about the department that serve this. I'm sorry, the officers that serve the city. So it goes in so many different ways on taking care of our officers. I can go on and on. There's so many different ways, but those are just some of the topics that pop out to me.
Okay, can we move on to someone else, and if we can
Yeah.
circle back?
Let's circle back.
Thank you. Councilman Gale?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Chief, for the presentation, and thanks to all of the Hartford Police Department, all the police officers, for everything that you do. Certainly greatly appreciated from this side of the microphone, and I especially appreciate the presentation that you've made this evening. It's quite comprehensive. We've got a pamphlet full of small slides on here, and I guess it's going to be much bigger once we get them in full size. There's a lot of good data.
So in fairness, when I skipped through some of the slides, it wasn't because I was trying to save time, as I just couldn't see them. So I figure we can get the information out through the question and answers. So.
Well, we're going to put the whole thing online, so
Yeah.
we'll all be able to see every single slide, and I know there's just an awful lot of facts, figures in here, a lot of detail, and certainly back to my appreciation for HPD and the job that you do. Also, I want you to know we recognize that you're doing it in an understaffed capacity, and that makes it even more significant from my standpoint. I further have heard you say several times, and again appreciate that you appreciate that there's always room for improvement. That none of us are perfect, and I'm glad to hear that you and the rest of the department are committed to always improving and working on things. And I personally heard you mention, just among other things, the training on implicit bias as part of your ongoing educational component for all police officers, and you're being in tune with trends and what's needed. And I applaud that. I look to the police department and look to you, who we've just made chief, to continue to do that, to continue to look around to see what the trends are, and where we can do better, where we can relate to our community better. I don't have any particular questions, but I do have a couple of comments that I want to make, a couple of little areas where I think you could improve, so I'll throw them out there for things to work on. When it comes to, and by the way, I'll mention things where we can improve as well, because the first area that I want to comment on is recruiting. And I noted in recruiting, you mentioned some of the community partners that you utilize. The community partner that wasn't mentioned there was the Hartford Public Schools, and I'm sure you do work with the Hartford Public Schools, but I just want to emphasize it, especially when there's a concern. We've all had this concern forever about having more of our police officers come from the community, And so getting into the schools certainly early on is part of that, and I always take great pride as a Hartford Public School graduate myself. I always look through the police department. I take note of the Hartford Public High grads that are on the police department, and I know we've got one of them sitting here tonight with us. And, you know, I love that, and I think other people like that. We like to see our own, kids grow up and take a place in the community. So I certainly encourage you to get out there. I will take responsibility on our side. I think it's imperative that for people, for everybody in Hartford, if we want our young folks to aspire to be a Hartford police officer, then we can't denigrate the Hartford Police Department. That's not going to be helpful in getting young people to look at the HPD as a job worth pursuing, as a job that they grow up thinking, hey, someday, I can work for the police. So we'll take some responsibility on our side, but I certainly encourage you to get out there into the schools to try to beef up the number of recruits that we can bring in that are from Hartford. The other comment I would make is on the community policing. One of my thoughts on community policing is that every one of your officers is a community police officer, and I think you probably share that. You've heard me say this before, and I'm just going to say it again. I always appreciate it when an HPD officer who's out there sitting in a car at a construction site or for some other reason blocking a street off, gets out of the car and communicates with the public. So I encourage you to continue to work with all the officers to get them out of their cars as often as possible. I mean, I know obviously you got to be in the car to do certain things, but I'm sure there are many more times when we could have many more interactions between the public and our officers. And in my world, communication is a great thing. The more interaction we have, I think the better it is for everyone. And, to the point that we heard Councilwoman Bermudez say that there were a number of people here last week who were concerned and distrustful. These are small ways to work on those kind of barriers. So just throw those things out there for you. But again, I heard the crime statistics that the governor came out with. I heard you say we've had a pretty good summer, and certainly appreciative of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a few questions, some specific to the citizens complaint process. So you mentioned the places where the forms are available and referrals that you get. Do you track where the complaint came from? Like, so say if it was the NAACP, do you know how many, complaints are being referred through that resource? Curious.
I can't say that we do. I can say that what we can do a little bit better is, and we're planning on doing this, is making sure that our website accurately reflects these locations. And just taking a look at it recently, it's not up to date. So there's one particular organization that was referenced that is no longer in existence. So we want to make sure that we do a better job of putting that on our website.
And have we thought about the libraries, using the libraries as a place to access it as well?
That's certainly an option that we can take a look at.
Okay, thank you. And I guess on the data, because we went back to 2014 with regard to the number of complaints, is that a fiscal year or calendar year?
Calendar year.
Okay, that's a calendar year. And how do we track that? I'm curious to just know the internal mechanism.
The Internal Affairs has a database that tracks every complaint that comes into the department, and it's tracked at the onset, and they give it a number. Every specific complaint is tracked, for example, 2018-1, and so on. It's given a number, and that's how you track it.
Great. So moving on with officer recruitment and retention, do you have data that you can share? Obviously, maybe you can answer it tonight, or maybe you can get back to us with respect to, over a 5-year period, how many cadets have we actually converted to officers and have gone through that full, process, if you will?
We do have information on that. We do capture that. I don't have it in front of me, but we can get that to you.
Okay, great. Also, do you have goals as far as what the makeup of the department, in an ideal state, what would the makeup look like with respect to, us being in the city of Hartford, that's majority minority, looking at the police force and what's available to you as far as bodies, what is that, ideal state of what the makeup of the police department should look like? Yeah. Do you have goals that, you've started to think about? I know you've only been here 8 years, but,
It feels like 8 years, but
right, because I'm a true believer of what is not measured doesn't count, right? So if we're not holding ourselves to goals and aspiring to something, we lose sight of what we're really actually trying to accomplish. So I'm curious to hear, have you thought about that? Have you laid out kind of goals of what the makeup of the department should look like?
So there's no bright line number that I'm going to tell you that I'm looking for a specific percentage. Obviously, we look to be as diverse as possible in terms of so many different factors. It's important to note for everyone that when I make a decision, either for a new hire or for a promotion, for whatever rank, I look at everything, and the ultimate decision is what's best for the department and for the city. And I'm looking for qualified candidates. I am not looking to check a box just to check a box. I am looking for the best, most qualified person that there is at that moment in time for the position that it's at hand. The more diversity, the better, obviously. Someone who comes from the city is more equipped to understand the concerns that folks in the city are going through than someone who is from outside of the city. That's an obvious. That makes that person more qualified. And that is a factor that I take into account when I go to promote someone. That's one factor, again, amongst so many different other factors. The more, the better is the goal, but it has to be the right people. In fairness to everyone. The process has to be fair. I also want to be 100% honest. I want the white male officer, the white female officer to feel that he or she is valued in his department as the Hispanic or the African American. Everyone has to be valued, and that is me. You're going to get a fair process no matter who you are.
So talk to me a little bit about what that, I guess, there's a subjective and objective process in kind of promotions, right? And how people move up the ranks. So it's obviously they have a test, but then there's also other factors that play in. So I'm really curious that's driven by HPD, or some of it is HPD, some of it is state requirements, and it's kind of a combination of both. I'm trying to gauge what is in, HPD's control to determine what questions are on the test, or, all those things, to get a real sense of like understanding at the heart of what that process looks like and how there may be implicit bias in it based off the types of questions we ask on a test, and also wanting to know, I understand you said that you can't make people sit for the test. Totally get it. And you only have the pool of people you have, right? But how are we encouraging people to sit for the test and aspire to move up in the ranks? But then also, how are we, I'll stop there. It's up there.
So a couple things you asked. So for the testing, there's actually a movement, and Assistant Chief Thody can probably speak better on this than I, but there is a movement across the country where they're trying to change the testing, similar to the discussion you've probably seen 5 or 6 years ago when they talked about SAT testing that had an inherent bias into the testing. They're looking at what are the relevant factors for a productive law enforcement officer, what makes a great law enforcement officer, and what are the factors that should be weighed. So there's a movement out there where vendors are looking, is there a better way we can test for promotions, and is there a better way that we can test for new officers? And part of that movement incorporates, do folks who are minorities learn differently than folks who are not? Do folks from the city learn differently than folks who live in the suburbs? There are some sort of, I'm not a psychologist, but there's a movement that is looking to bring that into testing. We're not there yet, but I think that can pick up some of that gap. With regard to your second question, mentoring, we have to continue to mentor younger officers. One of the things that I've tried to do throughout my career, and the officer who sits to my left is a testament to this, is I've tried to identify some young up-and-coming officers from various backgrounds and be a mentor to them and encourage them to move up and to take on greater responsibility within an organization. Every officer should be doing that. And it's not only the supervisors. We have leaders who are officers who've been on the job 10, 15 years, who are seen as informal leaders. They can mentor younger officers. So mentorship happens at all levels, and it should just continue to be encouraged.
And just a follow-up, do we know how many officers that sit for the test and don't pass the test, and of those that don't pass the test, what is the failure rate look like for minority candidates versus non-minority candidates? Do we track that data? Do we have a good sense of what that looks like?
We do track it. We can get that for you. Don't have it here for you today, but I think that's something we can track. Our human resources should have that, and I know Director Sharice Sherry is here. I don't know if she wants to talk about this or not, but I'm sure we can track.
She was here, but I don't guess she stepped out.
Okay.
We can follow up on that. And also, just on, we talked about citizen complaints and, it's trending downward or what have you, and also some other data points. Do we do any benchmarking towards other like cities to kind of, gauge where we are as far as the makeup of our police department in the various ranks, and also how many complaints, so we know at least we're like in range or we're not like totally out of range, as a way to kind of keep ourselves honest, if you will, to some degree?
There's informal benchmarking that's done in the industry when we talk to our counterparts, either at trainings or conferences, and you look at what other departments are doing. But it's very hard to do an actual objective benchmarking, because every city is so different. Even Hartford and New Haven are different in so many different ways, so it's kind of hard. You can get a guess as to where you should be. But to look at another city and say, let's compare ourselves to that is a little difficult. But, informally it is done, formally it's not.
Councilman Deutsch, thank you. Chief.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you all for coming, each and every one of you. Naturally, everyone, I apologize for being late. I was working in a clinic and so couldn't get the introduction. But, of course, I have certain questions. But what I try to do sometimes is first ask those given to me by constituents, taxpayers. People say, ask them this or ask them that. So let me try to do that. They're usually better than my own questions anyway. One person asked, what's the percentage today of officers who are trained in, like, you call it first aid for mental health. In other words, if a person seems to be acting out of his or her head, they're just not rational, or they seem either on drugs, or they just have mental issues. What is the percentage in which the whole force, all of us and all the officers, are trained to recognize and to deal with it, and also well, go ahead, let me stop there.
So the training you're referencing is what we call CIT training, which is crisis intervention training.
Mm-hmm.
We've rolled that out at the beginning of this year. Every new recruit class that graduated this year, every single new officer is certified in crisis intervention, and we have slowly trained the rest of our officers on CIT, and that training is ongoing.
So does that apply to each and every officer at any
Yes.
rank?
Yes,
And it's reviewed periodically?
correct.
Okay. And then, so another related comment is that in the mobile crisis unit, the crisis unit, it's pointed out that there are some individuals who are fearful or apprehensive when they see a uniform. They feel threatened for some reason, either their own history or something they've learned. And so, for instance, sometimes in medical care, you teach people not to wear a white coat with children because, they're scared. But being serious, do officers in the crisis unit always come in uniform, or do they sometimes come as in a different style and appearance?
Yeah, I mean, this is mostly our patrol officers who are responding, so they would always be in uniform.
Okay. That refers especially to some individuals that have special needs or are suicidal or something like that, you see. So we should assume that every officer, no matter how he or she is dressed, has in mind that the person might be ill in some way, and not to consider them necessarily hostile or threatening to the officer. Is that safe to say?
So every single call that an officer goes to, that officer is responsible for making so many judgments at an instant. You hear quite often that we're required to wear so many different hats, that of a sociologist, a social worker, an EMT. Every officer has to make a determination based on the facts before him or her at every single call. Some of it, it's dangerous. They have to make a determination pretty fast.
Sure.
But that's why the training that every officer goes through is so extensive.
Okay. Another person asked, noticed that the community groups that are listed as organizations, many of them receive funding from the city. In other words, community groups participating, are there any, or which ones are grassroots or nonprofits that don't receive any funding from the city?
I don't know if I could answer that question. You would have to ask those organizations.
Okay, well, it's a question that someone had, and I might as well pose it to you. And then also, is there a specific retention plan, either for those officers you feel, as you just said, are showing initiative, or are officers of color, in order to maintain the diversity? What kind of retention program might there be?
There's encouragement throughout an officer's career, whether it be through promotion or just a job well done, that an officer gets an attaboy from his or her supervisor. But I have to tell you that each and every officer is not necessarily looking for the encouragement or accolades. Each and every officer out there is serving the city because that's what they chose to do. We recognize good officers, we promote good officers. That's how you retain them. You pay them well, make sure their benefits are up to par with the industry standard. But those are things that a good officer doesn't really rely upon. Every officer does a good job because they choose to do that on their own free will.
Would you say, as sometimes people ask, might come before the Supreme Court, and it's a fair question, would you say that policy is colorblind?
Policy is
It's a hard question. Is it colorblind?
I'm not sure how to answer that question because I'm not sure I understand their question.
Well, it's not easy to explain, but basically when these cases are coming before universities or Supreme Courts and they talk about affirmative action, it's a comment in favor or against affirmative action that involves race or minority status or even gender. From what you said, could you say that there is no element of that or that there is?
You know, I'm not going to partake in a political discussion here tonight. That's just not my role as a chief of police.
Well,
There's well-settled law on that, and I would just rely on the settled case law on that.
okay, well, it remains to be seen where federal case law will go, depending on what happens tomorrow. Okay, so maybe to get to one of my own questions that I think you'll know I've asked, and the situation was brought to mind, I'll share with everyone. It happened, I went to the movies last night. I had a little time, actually, didn't have a council meeting, thank goodness. And I saw one interesting movie called Fahrenheit 11/9, which is interesting for everyone. But it had a preview of a movie about to come out this weekend, I think, pretty soon. And it starts off by showing a bright young teenage girl who's going out on a date and is in a car with her friend. And they're having a good time. This is in the preview. They're having a good time, and then they get stopped for, I don't know, unregistered vehicle or a taillight out or some kind of thing. And without taking it fully seriously, you know, when the officer approaches through the passenger's window, you know, asks him a few questions, and the girl says to comply, but the boy jokes a little bit, and all of a sudden he shows this. You know, he pulls up his hand and shows this. And I don't have to say what happened next. I mean, it's happened all over the United States where, you know, he just got shot and killed right away. And, well, it's emotional. And the rest of the movie, of course, the girl is devastated. Her teenage friend is killed. And then there are days and weeks of community protests and demonstrations. You know, just like whether it be in Ferguson or Baltimore, Oakland, a whole lot of places. That bridge in Texas, in Chicago. So the thing that, I don't know about others, but you lose sleep over is what exactly do we do in our training so that kind of thing will never, ever happen in Hartford?
So if anyone ever sat before you and predicted the future, that's a slippery slope that someone shouldn't go down, and I'm not going to do that tonight. I can tell you that we pray and hope that a situation like that never happens, and all we can do is do our best, keep training, keep working with our community, keep interacting with with the community that we serve each and every day, and keep improving. That's all we can do as a department.
Well, let me carry it a step further. I hope nobody minds. I know it's getting late, but when officers or any of us go through training, let's say again, here, thinking of the movies, for instance. Let's go back a little bit, you know. Excuse me?
Excuse me.
Pardon
Excuse
me.
me.
I'm making a
This-
point.
Larry.
In some other movies, even going back to the cowboy movies, you see sometimes they get into a gunfight and sometimes they duck and cover and they run when you have an outlaw shooting at them. Now, in this case, there have been situations, even in Hartford, where there are some, let's say, young men in a car fleeing, moving away from an officer, disobeying his command to stop the vehicle, but they're moving away. And we had a case, his name is Jay Sean Bryant, among others, who got shot in the back of the head. And My question is very specific, which I asked you, and maybe I didn't understand your answer. In the manual, the training manual, what guidelines do you have when someone is either fleeing on foot or fleeing in a vehicle, but the velocity is either steady or moving away from the officer? Does it say in the manual very specifically whether or not to reach for that holster or to do something else instead? I mean, please tell me the specifics so we don't have to lay awake at night wondering if anyone is shot in the back of the head or in the back like we've seen on TV. What is the guideline for all of you if you were in that situation? Someone is getting away from you.
Every officer in the country is trained under use of force under well-settled case law called Tennessee versus Gardner that dictates when and how you can use deadly force. And it's very specific in defense of yourself or the officer believes there's imminent death to themselves or a third person. That is when an officer can use deadly force. That is trained throughout the country, trained on that case that is pretty well known.
Well, okay, here. Nobody has to make the point again that many times there seems to be an appearance of someone reaching for a weapon, right? And unfortunately, we know sometimes it was an appearance, and it was either a cell phone or a wallet or some kind of thing. It's in many movies, including this one that you might see this weekend. So, in terms of guidelines for all of us, I mean, for all you officers and all of us, what training, either a daily reminder or something in the manual that will say, don't do that when someone is not a direct threat, or instead, just duck and cover behind your patrol car. I really would like to know that because it'll make us rest easier at night. I think everyone. So can you just say another sentence or two about that more specifically?
That is specific to every single situation an officer encounters. An officer has to make a judgment as to what's before them. I can't involve myself in hypotheticals, but I can tell you real-life situations in which I've seen officers hurt because the person in front of them didn't appear to be a threat, and then within an instant they were. We've seen a real-life event like that just this past summer in the city where we almost lost an officer. So who am I to sit up here and tell you when and where and how every single officer can go to defend themselves or someone else? I mean, that's a very tricky situation. But I can tell you, like I said earlier, the use of force is prescribed to us very specifically as to how and when we can use it based on well-settled case law.
And so finally, it doesn't get down to the detail of when or when not to reach and unholster your gun with some things in mind. The kid is moving away or he's moving toward, or the adult is fleeing from doing a burglary, going down the street the other way. We've seen it on TV, so.
So this is not TV, this is real life, and it's based on every single situation that an officer encounters. Every situation is different. Every situation is different. I can't give you a rule that will say that an officer can only take out his weapon in this particular scenario. Every scenario is different in real life.
Okay, fine.
Councilwoman Winch?
Chief, this is the easiest question of the night. How many cadets do we currently have in the department?
13.
13? Thank you.
Minority Leader? Councilwoman?
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I just basically want to say thank you all for the service that you give us daily. At the end of the day, everyone wants to go home to their families, right? I have a simple question. When someone walks into the Hartford Police Department, the civilian police form, the complaint, is that something that they have to ask for, or do you have those pamphlets in Spanish and English outside?
Yeah, they are outside and they are in Spanish and English.
Okay. So one can fill it out there, or email it or fax it, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Minority Leader?
Through you, Council President. So, circling back on that community conversation, which was very important and very informative, you know, we live in the world that we live in right now, and beyond that, there are biases that people have. And Chief, when you mentioned, you know, the system is, the department is not a perfect department working towards getting, becoming better in terms of the overall as a department. So we would love to see more conversations with the community, but beyond conversations, the general take of the conversation we had last week was followed by policy, followed by action, and benchmarks for the community. So that's going to be my last statement before asking the question of, when we hear from the residents who are here today, if you would be so kind as to be able to respond to their questions and/or their suggestions.
With regard to the policy, and I'm in agreement with that, and I know this is important to you, Councilwoman Fox, as well, policy, we are going through an accreditation process that I advised you in the past. That is one of my priorities, both on a state level and on a federal level, and what that entails is updating each and every one of our policies within the department, and that will bring them up to the level of a best practice across the country. And that will make us a modern-day policing agency, and the goal is to do that by next year.
Majority Leader Sanchez?
Yes, I have a question going back to the application to become, or to apply for a police officer. So when you mention credit check, that threw a red flag for me. I myself don't believe that we should be requesting anyone to put down or at least be investigated or check their background on credit check. Because, you know, there's many of the minorities that I know has a history of probably fair credit or poor credit, and it's not due to, because they're, you know, unwilling to pay their bills. Most likely it's because of unemployment. Now, how legal is this to have this on an application?
Every law enforcement agency asks for that because, remember, you as an officer, there will be times when you come across a large amount of money, so we do not want to put that officer in a situation where they would be compromised because of certain things that are outside of their control. That is a standard across the country, whether it's federal, state, or local agencies, any state. We would be negligent if we did not do that. Again, but that does not mean that someone with a negative credit report would not be hired. That's not the case at all. Every applicant is judged individually based on the circumstances at hand. So if someone had a negative credit report because they unfortunately went through a divorce, that's understandable. That happens.
So, for using your example, do you investigate that background of a back credit check?
That's what our detectives do. We have a detective who goes thoroughly into everyone's background, and so a detective, if you were applying for the Hartford Police Department, at the end of the process, a detective would reach out to you. He would come to your house, he would sit down, and he would go over your file with you. And part of the questions, the credit would come up, and the detective would say to you, what would you like me to know about this? And this would be the applicant's opportunity to discuss their story. And their story can be bad or good. If they come up with an explanation as to why their credit report is not so good because of a divorce, because of high student loan, these are things that we are equipped to deal with, and these are things that we hire folks with a negative, and we have, and I've personally done that. I've hired a candidate, without saying a name, who has a minority candidate, a female minority candidate, whose credit was not so good, but she went through a divorce. She was a single mom who was trying to raise 2 kids, but she had all the desire in the world to be a Hartford police officer, and I felt she would be good, and she was hired.
Okay, and then who creates this application? Who created the application? Is it HPD or at the state level, or HR?
Well, the specific application, I would assume, goes through Human Resources in the city, but as far as what the industry practices, that's a national, and it's regulated through the state as well, through POST, which is the Police Officer Standards and Training Council.
Okay. Now, just one last thing. I just want to say thank you to you and your staff, HPD. Really appreciate that you came over here this evening to share with us and the community your experience, your ideas, your thoughts, and what's been going on in HPD. As we know, we are, again, as it's been mentioned, it is some trying times at this moment. But I said it before, and I'll say it again. Every organization has a couple of bad apples. That does not mean we should discredit an entire department or organization. I'm here. I truly support you guys. I believe that the council support you guys, and we're here to work with you for one common goal. It's the safety for our community, and also the respect for our community, and it's the safety for our officers and the respect for our officers. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. I have 2 last questions for you, Chief. Now that you've been here for 8 months, as the majority leader stated, there's been some trying times recently. So I'm just curious to hear from you what, in your vantage point, are your biggest challenges and what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night, first and foremost, is the safety of the officers. They're the ones doing the work out there, putting their lives on the line, and I worry for them and their families. I will tell you personally that I want every officer in here to know that I take responsibility for the negatives of the agency, and I want them to only receive praise from the members of the community, because they do the heavy lifting. My job is easy compared to what they do each and every day. If you have concerns or complaints with the department, that's fair, but please address them with me, and make sure that you understand that I am the one responsible for that. But when you see an officer on the street, thank them for the job that they do, because they are doing the hard work. I am not. So please, responsibility for the negative is me, but they get all the praise. That's what keeps me up at night. It's the safety of the officers. And I love this city. I was born and raised in this city. I love the people in the city. I could still remember myself riding a big wheel down Flatbush Avenue, being just a young kid, and here I am sitting before you. I grew up in a housing project, but I'm sitting before city council. That's amazing to me. And there's so many kids like that in our city who have the ability to do whatever they want. That's why I'm here. That's what I love about the department. That's why I'm doing this job. But again, please understand that these officers really care. I see it day in and day out. They're affected by the negative publicity at times, knowing that they leave their significant others at home. They put on a vest. I mean, think about that for a second. An officer has to wear a bulletproof vest to go to work. How many of you have to do that? Right? There's something to be said for that, and they signed up for that. And let's give them credit where credit is due. And when their credit is not due, put it on me, and I'll gladly take it. Thank you.
Thank you. So last question. When you are at your 1-year anniversary next year, what do you hope to accomplish looking back? So at that 1-year anniversary, what do you would have hoped to accomplish in your first year as chief?
A number of things. Diversity, keep that moving forward. I want a department that interacts with the community members. I want our officers to understand the importance that I have, the importance that I place on respecting the community that we serve. We don't police the city. I like to say, we serve the city. That is a mantra that I want each and every officer to know for the record. I want us to be open, transparent. That's kind of a buzzword nowadays, but we really mean that. That entails body-worn cameras. My hope by then would be that we have the body-worn cameras rolled out and we're implementing them. I hope that we continue with our technology push. I hope we continue with our accreditation. And I hope that we have more officers on the street. And I owe credit to the mayor and to you, council, for supporting resources and getting us classes. And we need our staffing up. Those are the immediate goals for a year.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all of you, the chief of police, and also all of the command staff and officers who have joined us today. I think this was a very informative discussion and dialogue amongst us. And again, I think we all understand and know, as you've said multiple times, there's always room for improvement. We're always going to have trials and tribulations. Things are always going to come up. It's not a panacea. It's not a perfect world, where none of us are perfect. So there's going to be situations, and I think it's a matter of how we respond to it and how we course correct and how we continue to improve. And know that council is here to do that work with you in partnership. Because this is our city, we all are here, many of us born and raised, have children here, are raising them, and care about this city, and want to protect our residents. And also we want our officers to feel good in our city as well, and feel good about the work that they do on behalf of the residents every day. So I just want to say thank you. This was a matter of us taking a step back and really starting a dialogue that we will continue, again, and how we can continue to improve and move beyond recent incidents, I'll say that. But thank you again. We are now going to move to public comment, so I appreciate all of the people who are here that have signed up for your patience. And again, hopefully this conversation was just as informative for you as it was for council. And I hope that officers can stay to listen, because I think it's very important for us to have this continuing dialogue, and for officers to understand where the community is at and what they're feeling, their anxieties, concerns, or what have you. And also for the community to understand the dangerous situations that they are put in every day. So thank you, and now we will move to public comment.
Thank you.
So with that, I have Assistant Majority Leader John Gale, who's going to get out our timer. We will allow for 2 minutes each. Again, I know it's getting late, but we have quite a few people that have signed up, and hopefully not too many left, because I know it was a long evening and it was very hot in here. So I really appreciate all of you who have stayed and stuck it out with us. But again, I ask that you, when you come up to the mic, that you state your name and your address for the record. And again, be mindful of the time, and let's respect each other's time here tonight. So without further ado, Mr. Will Moffett.
Will Moffett, 121 Heath Street. It doesn't matter what extreme you're on, whether you believe that the police are always perfect, or always heroes, or the only things kind of holding back pure anarchy, or whether you see the police as some sort of militarized modern slave patrol. There's clearly something broken with this system. It is not a case of bad apples. There is something rotted at the root, and I do not blame the individual officers who are doing a job I could never understand. I don't even necessarily blame many civil servants here. I blame the lawyers, the same lawyers in the Corporation Council who for 12 years would table any complaint that would cost the city money. The same lawyers in the police union that their only concern, I was part of unions, I'm the son of unions, it's CYA, cover your ass. It's about protecting your people, regardless of the truth, regardless of what they've done. And what this police union has done, and it's perpetual, and what they've done to Councilwoman Bermudez, who had the courage to stand up, was very disgusting to many people in the community. And it's all about this bureaucracy and this money and this political power. This is not a case of bad apples. You got the guy James Guzzi, who was busted beating up his wife. Why was he hired when he had a police record? Why was Stephen Barone promoted? Why didn't people realize that Justin Torino was driving his car around unattended, not responding to crimes with his drug dealer? Why did it take this long? And I know we have new leadership, so I can't blame them, but these things go back. I'm going to end with a quick short story why I take this so personal. In the late 1990s, there was a cop, Russo, who stood up. He knew a guy who they were trying to blame with a crime didn't do it. So he stood up, he got the right culprit, and he was trying to stand up to some police corruption within there. There were two cops, Robert Lawler and Chris Lyons, who harassed this man, but because of a culture of union protection, a culture of us first, these two men were not disciplined. And what happens? Robert Lawler goes on to kill a man. Chris Lyons, a completely dirty cop, is sold as being a hero. He comes and he becomes the head of security for my college, Trinity campus. And when I'm there, I get to see that when Chris Kennedy gets beat up by Trinity students, Chris Lyons, who knows it was that, doesn't do anything. He retires. When I meet up with people who are part of the police department and I realize they were investigating that and they didn't do that, and you get some brown kid that gets, I'm sorry. The police do an important job. But our frustrations aren't on them. It's on a broken system. And if we spend as much money and time as we do reforming the police, as we do to the root causes of poverty and drug addiction, we'd still have problems, but we wouldn't have as many. I'm sorry to come across very anti-cop, but historically, it's built within there. So good people, good leadership, we're going to be repeating the same pattern. So if we don't figure out a way to get the city and the state to push reforms through, regardless of fear of union power, we're not going to see anything change. And this conversation will not be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Kamara Harrington.
Hello, Kamara Harrington, 670 Hillside Avenue. And I follow off of Will and just apologize before I start. I usually feel as if I'm somewhat eloquent, but I ended up being triggered tonight when I heard laughter as we were talking about how the effects of trauma might affect some of our citizens. So I am not right there. Council, thank you. Your questions were great and wonderful. I understand that right now we just get to comment. But there was a slide, and there was a slide that spoke to the number of civilian complaints, and that slide showed a steady decline. And I was struck when the chief shared that he saw from that slide, he saw that clearly things were getting better. What I saw and what folks sitting with me saw was that we've given up, that we don't believe in this process, that we don't believe that if we make a complaint, anything will happen. But I was here last week, thank you. I was here last week and I'm here tonight and I'm gonna keep showing up. And I will tell you that right now inside of my body, I don't feel okay because I know that people who support the police think it's okay to laugh at people who've experienced trauma and walk through the world in a different way than I do. But these conversations need to keep happening. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for bringing your staff. Thank y'all for showing up in uniform and being who you are. And Steve, just thank you. But thank y'all for pulling this together because these are conversations. If we can laugh at how trauma affects our fellow citizens as if it's something funny, and if we don't understand that someone showing up in one of those uniforms might possibly make me feel not okay, clearly, we need to continue having these conversations. So thank you. I know that these have been happening all over the place in many different ways. Thank you for making this happen.
Thank you. Tom McCormick. Tom McCormick. Maybe you lost one to the heat in here. Hyacinth Yenny.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hyacinth Yenny, chair of the Neighborhood Revitalization Group. So there's no perfect in this world, but you know what we do? We work together to make it work for everyone, all right? I'm here this evening because there's many things being said, and I want to be be first to be said, or whatever it may be, that I am here to support my officers, every one of them that's in uniform, in here and outside. Now, we hire a chief to do a job, and when something goes wrong, we expect the chief to address it, and address it in timely manner. But we don't create an animosity around our police department. We voted you all up there, and we expect you to respect the department and don't start riot around the city. We're in a good place. Our previous chief worked really hard to get us where we are. And this new chief come along and he continued to work with our resident in the city. Yeah, not all of us are gonna want to work with our officers, but you know what I've learned over the 40 years I've been involved in this city? Working with some department or whoever it may be, you get the best, okay? So, I'm just here to let you all know that we need to work with our police department, our fire department, all the departments, making sure they have all the staff they need to do their jobs, all right? We expect that from you. That's why we put you there, okay? So, I'm here to say, let's work together to get what we need to get done in this city. We will be a better city. We had issue years ago with the resident and police, but we have had good leadership that teach us and tell us how we can make it work for everyone. And so I'm expecting you as leaders to trickle that down to our community to say, hey, we have a chief that will deal with the issues and we will get it done. Let's not be another city where there's always a riot. All right? Yes, people need to speak out, but let's do it in a respectable way. Thank you.
Thank you. John Mitchum?
Josh Michtam, 135 Madison Avenue. I'm also a public defender in the juvenile division, and I think I could go on both what Hyacinth said and what Kimora and Will said, which is that there's a lot of people who support the police, but I think there's also a lot of mistrust. And I heard the chief speak a lot about accountability. And certainly, if there's going to be trust, whatever the basis is, whatever is going on right now, there is distrust. And so there has to be accountability. And if you look at any position of public trust, any specialized job, I'm a lawyer, Councilman Deutsch is a doctor, if we mess up at our job, the complaint doesn't come to us. And in fact, if I do something wrong with one of my clients, it doesn't even just go to my boss, the chief public defender. It doesn't stop there. There's a whole separate entity that can take my license away, that can stop me from repeating my error. And so it is with doctors and many other things. And I would suggest that police are every bit as essential and their job is every bit as sensitive. I mean, they have guns and they're allowed to use those guns on people. Not that they do, but they can, right? That's their job. So if we're gonna have accountability, we need accountability that's outside the department. And what I heard was the Civilian Review Board is outside the department and they send a recommendation back to the chief. Everything comes back to the chief. Now, I think the chief is a man of goodwill. He seems like he is, but you don't get trust without real accountability, without someone outside who can look at all of these things and say, yes, we agree with what you've done here, or no, we disagree, and you have to do something different. Now, right now, we don't have that. I mean, I guess the mayor could fire the chief, but that's sort of a blunt instrument for what we should have, which is an outside body that can look at what the police do, that can investigate independently, and that can have some teeth, some force to make changes when changes need to be made. Maybe they never need to be made, but it gives us faith, and it gives us trust as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Hammond.
Hi, Leslie Hammond, 1 Linden Place. Thank you, Chief Rosado, and your staff, and I hope the officers didn't feel like you were on display. I really appreciate you being here. So I just have a number of thoughts, and thanks so much for doing this. Community service officers, I've been to some NRZs, it's been awesome. because the NRZ really has a strong relationship. But a lot of people are not in NRZs, and I feel that a lot of people don't even know they have a CSO. And I personally have tried to post it on Hartford Dwellers or different Facebook groups. So I don't know if there's a way to get it out there to the public, because a lot of people have no idea who their CSO is because they might not go to an NRZ. And I think they're really important. Also, we used to have Brian Foley, who was a public information person, and I felt like he really got out front of things before we got a little crazy on some of our Facebook groups. We felt at least he was listening. Maybe he didn't have answers, which he might say he didn't have answers, but I think it was really helpful to have somebody like that. So I don't know if you have an intention to still do that. I have a friend that would be an awesome police officer. I wasn't clear if you're just looking for Hartford people now, because she grew up in Hartford, but she has a Bloomfield address. So I guess I can encourage her to apply. But I know she applied in the past and something happened. I'm not sure what happened. And I think it would be really great if it's not just online. I think that can be daunting for people. I don't know. I am lucky I'm self-employed. I don't have to do the online thing. But I think if there was a person to talk to, that would be great. I don't know if that's possible. The Police Civilian Review Board, we have talked a lot about that, and as Chief Rosado said, it's not under him, it's under the mayor, and then you all to try to hold the mayor accountable, and we've got to do it because I don't think there's a chair now, because Councilwoman Malley is no longer the chair. So we need to really look at that. And lastly, I would love for Councilwoman Fox to do another community meeting with officers and us. I think it would be awesome. Thank you.
Anna Siri.
Good evening, Councilwoman, thanks, members of the council, Chief Rosado, Hartford PD, and the general populace. I'm very concerned because I heard everything that was presented here tonight, and one thing that I have when it comes to diversity is when we reach out in the Hartford community, let's also take a look at the other ethnic groups. We have a big Albanian, we have a big Bosnian population, we also have Brazilians, we have South Americans, Peruvians, so I think we need to branch out so that people feel that they're represented. I think of the negativity associated with what's happened in the police department. It will impact on future people applying for the police department, especially if they feel they're not being welcomed by us, the community, and by our leaders. So that's something that we really have to be careful of. I know that there has been instances where there was an officer that was trigger happy and whatnot, but we didn't place ourselves in his shoes. I think he was just being stupid more than anything else. And I think we have to look at that. There was another officer that almost lost her life. I think that when they respond, because of all the issues that we have nowadays in the present time, that they should be responding at least in twos, so that at least they can look out after each other. The one that was recently in the news, I was very concerned, and no one mentioned it here tonight, that officer actually brought a drug dealer, and he was under the effects of cocaine and alcohol, and it's like beyond my rationale to think that he could actually walk into police department and not anyone notice, especially putting everyone's life in there that are officers in that particular building. I think that in itself needs to be looked at so that they can really be able to take care of themselves. I think also that I talked before about the Public Safety Academy. We have children or youth there. We need to reach out to see some of them could become police officers, firefighters, or whatever. I know Chief Rosado has been here for less than a year. I was privileged to be at a meeting with him and some of his assistant chiefs. I think he deserves the opportunity to make some of the changes that will be required. I attended a meeting last week, and I agree with a lot of the things being discussed, but there were a lot of people there that were very upset and very angry with the police department. I suggest that probably a task force should be developed, consisting of some members of the council, members of the Hartford PD, members of the NRC who have worked very closely with the police department, and some of the people that have that distrust, so we can all sit around and discuss what those issues could be and how we can all work together better in order to better the community of Hartford if we are able and eager to be able to attract good people to our police department. And as it relates to drug testing, that's a big one for me. I think we all should be held accountable, and everyone, the council, Hartford PD, fire department, all the departments across the city should be randomly drug tested. Thank you.
Thank you. Raquel Calderon.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming, Chief. Basically, I'm over here to support the Hartford Police Department. As I said last week, I had a very good experience with the Hartford Police Department. I believe they hearty person, they human beings, they are just like us, and they are doing the dirty work for us. They are protecting us. I feel safe when I see a police officer and somebody is giving them a bad image, a dirty image. And I don't know who printed this, but to me, this is violence. It's, it says organizing ourselves and, with as disruptive as possible, not depending on politicians and protections or approval. That, to me, that's inciting, rioting, fighting, instead of putting us together, as separating us. As many of them said here, we are supposed to be working together, and I am here at any time if they need me, but I really like the police in Hartford, and you know what? I'm really getting really sad and disappointed that even in the council, some of the councilmen are not giving the Hartford Police Department the recognition that they deserve. Shame on you, because they are public works, and that's why they have to go through tests. I mean, it's common sense what they have in presentation. All public works, they have to go through a test, drug test, and lots of things that you have to pass. Even if you're white or red or purple, if you don't pass, you don't pass. Let's stop, discriminating them. That's being racist against them when we're treating them differently. This is my feelings, and believe me, that's what I see. It's all over the country. They are playing wolf. The people are doing drugs. They are rapists, and they are here to save us, and instead of giving them help, we are giving them a bad image. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Maldonado.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kathleen Maldonado, 33 Bethel Street, Clay Arsenal area. And I have a lot to learn. I didn't know these meetings were like this. I have a whole list of questions. I wish I can have I can meet you for coffee on Friday, because I wish I can talk to you about my weekly experiences. I see where you're coming from, but I networked with you a couple of times, and you cut me off without even hearing my whole side of the story, already judging the situation. You don't even know what cop I'm referring to. So you also have to not be biased and listen to the whole story. There's one side, two sides, and the truth, You got to listen to all sides. But anyway, to get back to this, I can understand your situation as you put your uniform on each morning. I have to pass a whole bunch of scary-looking people when I walk the streets of Hartford, because I don't have a car, I bike ride, I'm a walker. So firsthand, I get experience with them. And but as my daily walk 7 days a week, I'm more afraid of being approached by officers than I am of running into a potential rapist or a mugger on the street. After the incident in downtown Hartford where the officer had that scary situation, I'm even more concerned now, because now the guidelines of deadly force, when I call an officer to come to my house, he can use the gun to knock on my door. even if it's his first attempt at knocking. I can understand if you were knocking on the door for 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, but you just got here. You really need to knock on with the gun on the door, startle the whole building, startle me. I could be a traumatic person. You don't know that. How am I going to handle that sort of anxiety if you're already approaching me on a level you don't even know who's behind that door? I have a picture that I brought with me of the dents of the gun on the doorway as you guys approach my home. So just to say that, at the Deutsches talk about what are the guidelines, is at their discretion. Discretion, the freedom to decide what should be done in any particular situation. And it's at their discretion. That's a very scary situation to be in. As far as accountability, I'm doing my part as well, because I could be that bad apple as well. So I'm doing a lot of learning, getting involved with my city. I'm learning about the people that I walk past by every day and their addiction or their recovery. So I've been taking courses on that just to learn about my community, the people who live here. And I am for the police. I understand you are here to serve and protect us. I look up to you. I may need you a lot of times. When I am the victimizer, you know, I apologize. There's always a situation as to why we behave a certain way. But I am for safety, and I want this relationship between myself and you to grow. I would like to know how I can get involved with your training programs, because as far as the training that I've been taking up to this date, I believe if you officers would take that training, it could be very beneficial in how you approach the diversity of this city. So I don't want to be afraid of you anymore. I've worked a lot this summer with your community service officers, which is a great opportunity. Even my family was surprised, like, Kathleen is hanging out with officers, wow. And I want that to continue growing. I don't want to fear away or feel like I have to cower every time I see you coming. Oh my God, even though I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not even driving, so you can't say you pulled me over for a headlight. But it's like, I don't want to be afraid, and I want to know how I can be involved in your safety, because I think learning is what's going to change this community and the stigmas that are being held in this community, Clay Arsenal specifically, because that's where I was born. But thank you, I appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you. Bolani Ramez. Apologies if I...
It's okay, it's Bulong.
Bulong.
535 Hillside Avenue. I didn't actually realize I was signing up to talk when I signed in on that sign-in sheet. But I want to just address a couple things that were said. First and foremost, the police are not a race. You cannot be racist towards police. We can critique the police. They work for us. We are the city that they work for. And so to say that we should just be thankful for what they do, sure, and there's room for improvement. To question or wonder or be surprised that there's a critique of police is to ignore what is happening nationally. Right? And so this is not unique to Hartford. What the councilman was referencing was the movie The Hate U Give, which is a young adult book that turned into a movie. If you are an officer, you should probably read it. In addition, you should also read The New Jim Crow. That pamphlet that you reference is talking about mass incarceration. Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a legal scholar, wrote a book about it. 13th is a film on Netflix that you all can watch that breaks it down if you're not an avid reader. If you are policing in a city, predominantly a black and brown city, you need to be knowledgeable and up to date on what is happening with mass incarceration in this state and in this country. There are facts, there are statistics, there are data, and I understand that the chief has not read that book yet. I had a copy, I was gonna bring it for you, but I left it at home because I have a new baby and I forgot. But I encourage all of you to read it, start a police book club, talk about it, figure out how you wanna approach the city with the knowledge and the understanding of yourselves within a context that is larger than Hartford, because you are a representative of a larger institution of policing. Also, you all should really understand the history of policing and why police became a profession in the first place, which has to date back to the policing of black enslaved folks. So that's really important for you all to know the history of your profession and continue to grow and learn. That is all.
Thank you. Derek Hall.
That's my husband. He's not here.
Okay. So you spoke on both of your behalves. Kennard Ray.
Thank you, Council President, Majority Leader, and Minority Leader for having me tonight, and to Chief Rosado and your staff. While multiple points of complaint submission places and mechanisms have been illustrated tonight to include local trusted community organizations such as the NAACP, these efforts seem to be wishful at best. Why? Because with a self-regulated system of citizen reporting that ultimately leaves the final decision to act with internal affairs or other police control entities, our local citizens' ability to lodge true and honest grievances is lacking, especially when you consider officers are only required to receive 2 hours of moral and ethics training. Additionally, Hartford's department has historically failed at creating a racially and ethnically diverse workforce, as evidenced by its inability to successfully complete the requirements of the consent decree handed down in Cintron v. Vaughn over the last 40 years. In fact, a 2015 report by the national publication Governing ranked Hartford as the 7th overall out of 269 police departments across the nation when it comes to representation gaps between local communities and the police that work for them. More clearly and to the point, in a city that at the time has been cited as 84% persons of color or other ethnic minority, an overwhelming majority of cops are white, and no, that's not a rumor, Chief. Hartford's police culture has been out of touch and misaligned with the culture of Hartford's citizenry for generations. The number of complaints lodged do not matter because we all know that very few people in a city where more than a third of the population is suffering below the poverty line and otherwise disempowered will lodge a complaint. I have scars dating back 15 years and older that can prove that police misconduct, one right here. In our department is no way a string of isolated events, but a cultural norm. The us versus them mode of operation has not worked. Chief Rosado, we understand there are no easy answers, just as we understand and appreciate that you are a competent and able leader. You have the opportunity to revolutionize community policing and end the regressive and oppressive style that Maria Cintron fought against more than 40 years ago. And just anecdotally, with just 20% Latino or Hispanic representation in the force, is that self-reported or by surname? A 60% white police force in a city that is 84% non-white just doesn't make sense. 38 black officers total, meaning nearly 10% of your black officers were here tonight. What's that representation look like dispersed on the street right now when compared to more than 250 white cops on staff and available for patrol? Thank you for your time.
Mr. Ken Green.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to say that my general thought is that we all support the police. The functions of law enforcement in any community, I think, is needed. And so any discussion, I think, that the community has with the police and politicians has with the police, to me, is not a us versus them. I think if we take the concept of us versus them and try to not do that, we can have some more meaningful dialogue. It's never a us versus them. The police department, comprised of men and women, humans, and the humanity of them and their responsibilities is similar and no different than any one of us, whether we're an environmental sanitation worker, whether we're a teacher, I'm a social worker by profession. We all have to recognize and be respectful of all of our humanity. I have some concerns with the police department based around 3 areas. Community policing. The concept of community policing as continued to be defined by the police, I think needs to be reevaluated. Community policing cannot always be defined by the police. Community policing does not mean foot patrols. It does not mean more surveillance and computers in the police station. It does not mean more new police cars. It doesn't mean those things. Community policing, I believe, should be that if there's funding for the police department, they should have a joint strategy with the community to improve that relationship. I believe that community policing should be about having more dialogue with the community in a non-judgmental, safe environment where the police need to have conversations. I heard the police chief say that police officers are required for 60 hours of training after they become a police officer. I would ask whether or not the police chief is willing to say that I will require and make it a mandate as part of in-service training for all the police officers to spend one day, 8 hours, having conversations with the community. That if he can do that, have him commit to do that tonight so that he says that I'm committed as part of community policing and training for my police officers that they're going to meet with the community in an environment to have some discussion, and I'm going to mandate that. Make that part of the in-service. I would do that. The police, I was a little concerned about the statistics about the complaints and the drop-off from I believe it was 2015 to now. It's a 65% drop-off. 65% drop-off of the complaints. What is happening with these complaints to the police department is becoming very minimal. And so, again, I would ask the police chief to try to do a little bit of research to try to find out if we can find some answers as to that. I would just hope it's not where the community is feeling so concerned and so afraid to report, or that they feel that report would not garnish any kind of a remedy so that they won't do that. And if it becomes to the point where the citizens do not feel like they can report, then that process is ineffective. And so since we are seeing the trend, there's a way that we can look at that and see if we need to interject and do something about it. You don't just say, oh, look, we only have 40 complaints this year, we're doing better. That's not a conclusion that you make from that. And so again, that's an opportunity to take statistics and delve a little more and to try to find out what is going on, because that's a 65% drop in 4 years. That's a big drop. Many more things I would like to say, but I continue as a social worker and a clinician that work with people to offer a project with the police department in the community to have a dialogue and a conversation to improve relationships and to basically improve that trust. As a mental health professional, the stresses and the anxieties and the concerns that police officers have to have, I recognize. But I also recognize, as I think Ms. Maldonado said, when me as a black man, born and raised in Hartford, live in Hartford, walk in my community at 12 o'clock at night, I have to fear whether or not I may even be attacked by people in my community that look like me or not look like me. But I have to be cognizant of my community and aware of the environment. And so I have to be concerned. I don't necessarily also want to be concerned if I see a police officer and whether or not I have that same fear, that same feeling of fear or caution, and I'm not going to say it's fear, it's more caution when I see a police officer. Some people may feel like I see a police officer, I feel protected. I want to feel protected. I believe they are here to serve and protect me, but that's not necessarily the immediate response that I may have because of what's happening not only nationally, but does happen locally, where there are obviously, we've seen a few of the examples of some poor decisions and some real, to me, serious concerns about police conduct. I want to believe that's a minority of the police officer, that is not the majority. I wish the majority of the police officer would not be silent and do a little bit more work on trying to make sure that they're a little bit more transparent about what's happening. They have to deal with it. Transparency is not when you get caught or the community finds something out about the department that you didn't expose it and say, we want to be transparent. That's after the fact. Transparency happens before that. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek Ware.
How you doing? I would just like to address something really fast. I don't want to put Chief on the spot, but I just want to just show him something really fast. Hold on. This statement says, I just wanted to show him before I says it because it's his words. It said, we want people to feel comfortable in their neighborhoods. Do you really and truly agree with that statement you just said? What I want to just tell you something right now. Me and a lot of these community members here, with this one officer you have on the streets right now, we don't feel safe at all. You want to be trigger happy with people like us? Let me tell you why that story is so deep, that statement was so deep to me. Because we had a trigger happy cop before that shot and killed my guy's right here, son. And I'm gonna just let him speak for the rest of the words for me, because this how really this is real to me. And I don't want him to see him no more on the streets. I want to see him get fired. Excuse me, I know you can't fire him, but I want him to resign without the opportunity to get a pension, because that's not cool with me. Go ahead, Keith.
I'm Jay Sean Bryant, father.
Thank you.
And I could tell you what I've been through, what I'm going through, and it's real. Until you step in my feet, you can understand. Going through what I went through, y'all call us, I've been on the street since I've been 11. Y'all call us a gang or whatever, but there's also a gang in the police department, unless you want to call it that or you want to call it a group of police officers that don't care about the citizens. And I done went through it. The police chief, some of y'all up there, but one person that stuck by me when my son got killed, y'all don't speak for us. When my son got killed, I learned the meaning of justice. Just us.
That's right.
It was my family that I had to deal with. You got a man right here, when I was going through it, that was patrolling the streets. Y'all stopped him and his partner from trying to help the community. And you allow policemen do more crime than we do. I sat at the same meeting and asked for an internal investigation of Robert Lawler. I don't even know what happened, or did y'all do one? I know one thing, he was in the newspaper saying he was getting his pension, and he got it. What y'all do, y'all let a policeman get away with something, a trigger-happy cop that's gonna say, I shoot. I got arrested for calling him a punk-ass white boy and had 3 felony charges. And you got a policeman that could tell me he could shoot me, and he's with someone else, another officer, and that officers don't arrest him for threatening. What about if my mentality was to shoot him? I'll go to jail, but it was all right for a policeman to tell me I'll shoot him, or I could tell this man right here, I'm gonna shoot you, I'll be in the back of his car. There's a lot of unfairness out here. And it's not the community that have to know the police officers. The police officers have to know us. Because like I said, I grew up in Hartford. I grew up when they had brown paddy wagons, when gangs was around, when the policemen jumped out with baseball bats. I grew up in Hartford. So it ain't me getting to know any one of them. They need to know the community. Just because people wear their pants baggy or I got a hoodie on, I'm not a bad person. We might do bad things, just like the policemen do bad things. But y'all don't say nothing. Y'all let them get away with it. Lawler had got away with so much stuff that anything he do, it was covered up. You got some policemen now that might cover it up. The police chief might cover it up. And I'm speaking real, because you ain't been in my shoes. And the same thing gonna happen to another kid, or it could have happened to them people that night when that policeman said, move, I shoot. And I wonder what's going on in his case. Is there an internal investigation? Is the city of Hartford still paying him to be on leave? Have he got arrested? Is he gonna get fired? I guarantee you if he could retire before anything happened to him, he's gonna get his pension. And who's to blame? The people sitting up there because we're not telling this man his job. And then someone need to be over the police chief. There need to be some people over the police chief, because when my son got shot, and everybody knew it was wrong, but nobody wanted to speak up about it, but me. And then y'all want to tell me to be quiet. When my son got killed, a police chief said he was doing God work. How you kill an innocent 18-year-old kid that's riding by? How do you shoot anybody twice in the back of the head, leaving an incident, and he's in the middle of someone, a police officer and someone else? How do you shoot him twice in the head and said he was doing God work? Is that something you gonna tell a parent? Hello? I'm talking to the chief. Could you answer? Is that something you're gonna tell a parent next time a kid gets shot in the back of the head that that police officer's doing work? You got a lot of police officers that's coming from the war. They done seen stuff. I know I'm off sometime, but they done seen some stuff that we haven't seen. So do you think they have a straight head, but you give them a uniform and a gun when you don't know if that person gonna snap? But wake up, understand a parent that lost his only good child. Wasn't nothing like me. And I tell you, I was hell. My son wasn't nothing like me. I raised him good. But something happened. Whatever y'all talked about tonight, I'm gonna put it like this. You're lying to the city, the people of Hartford, because y'all gonna sit up there just like y'all is now with your mouth quiet, knowing it was wrong. And if you have the guts, you'll speak up. I know she will. She'll speak up. She with us. She live in the neighborhood. She see what goes on. But she ain't bite her tongue. But most of y'all up there, bite your tongue. Y'all will. Y'all keep your mouth quiet. It ain't got nothing to do with a lawsuit or nothing. It got to do with right and wrong and dealing to help a family go through something. I'm telling you, I lived it. If you don't believe me, you'll never believe nothing else but these lies y'all telling each other, because they lies. For all I know, we wouldn't even know it's one of these policemen in that category I just said. A group of gangs that would rob us, rob the people from the hood, or just take you to jail for nothing. I see this policeman right here. I know he won't. And I could say he won't. But there's a lot of stuff y'all don't understand. But y'all sit up here and y'all could talk. I'm telling you because I lived it. And it ain't no joke. You don't let a policeman get his pension, an $80,000, $90,000 pension for shooting a young black kid in the ghetto, don't know what he could have been. And no one says nothing. George, that's your name? What happened to the internal investigation of Robert Lawler? Dropped. Why? Was he found? It was dropped because he got his pension, right? So why would you go on with it?
So we're not gonna we can talk offline, and I appreciate you coming out, and this is really important for
it's
all
really,
of us to hear and the police to hear.
It's really important for the people that sit.
Absolutely.
It's really important for the people over here to sit, because I'm one of them. And as long as y'all talk, you'll cut someone off. I ain't gonna come disrespected, but you'll cut me off, but y'all could talk as long as y'all want. No disrespect to you, but the people on this side should know reality, because like I said, I lived it and still living it. Thank you for letting me
Absolutely.
speak.
Thank you.
And
Thank
just
you.
for the record, my name is Derek, Woodland Street, Hartford, Connecticut.
Thank you. Good to see you. Phyllis, Aries.
Mr. Bryan, we do owe you an apology.
Dr. Deutsch. Dr. Deutsch. No. Excuse me.
An apology.
Dr.
We owe you an
Deutsch.
apology, regardless
Dr.
of what
Deutsch.
Council President says. On behalf of the city, don't do
You are
that.
out of order.
Now
Out of
you
order.
are.
We appreciate you coming out. That's not the case, sir. Thank you for coming out tonight. Ms. Aries?
Thank you, Council President, council members, chief, and officers. I am in support of the police officers, but I think supporting someone or supporting the group also means that there's good things that you speak about, and also there's things that is not working that you should speak about. That doesn't mean you're not in support. And a lot of the things that was said, especially by Ken Green, I wanted to say, but in a little more specific way. For example, I feel, and what I'm hearing as a community leader, is that some of the things that may not work for the South End works very well in the North End. And it shouldn't be a blanket decision when regulations or things are being enforced. And I was happy to hear tonight that as far as the CSOs, that you divided them up in 4, and I don't know what the districts are, but that would help when the CSOs go out to the NRCs and so forth, that they can hear the specifics of what we need. Hartford is a little unique because we're very diverse in culture, but it's kind of separated throughout Hartford. So, and it's always been that way, right? So you have maybe the Latino area, then you have the Italians, and you have the West Indians, and blacks, and everybody else are kind of grouped together, and then we're starting to kind of melt. But we have different cultures, and different cultures have different needs. So what I'm seeing is, and I was concerned about, for example, we have our big West Indian celebration, and we felt intimidated more than the help of the police to just make sure that everybody is safe. For example, you lined up on the streets of Main Street with your police cars and the flashing lights. So anybody who come, and there was like about 10 cars, and that was the nights of our big event. When people come out as patrons to celebrate and have fun and see that, they think it's a crime scene, they think they're just intimidated and scared from that. The next day, I'm traveling through downtown, and there was a big baseball game, and it was in the evening, around 8 o'clock, everybody's coming out, and I saw something completely different. I saw the black cars, no lights, officer-friendly, walking people across the street, and I was like, wow, why didn't we get this last night in the North End? Why did I feel like, oh my God, somebody got killed, and there was riots and stuff like that? So those are the kind of things, and maybe that was a decision based on perception of what could happen, but for us, it was just unfair. It's not the same. And that's what we would like to see police do. Like, and what it would take is maybe coming in, like they said, to the community, coming into the organizations, the community meaning the cultures, and understanding. It's important for us to leave. We are very sociable people. So it's very important to us to socialize, leave, and go get something to eat. Our restaurants are being required to close early based on police not signing off on the permits. But for me, it makes sense. If I had a couple of drinks, I don't want to drive. I want to hang out and get something to eat, get something. That's important for our culture. So maybe it don't work over in one area, but it works over in this area. And I'm just asking that we consider that, you know? We consider the different cultures, the different areas, and don't blanket everyone in the same way when we make our decisions. And I'm hoping that the council can help us to determine what's good for North Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again to the chief and your officers for coming out tonight and engaging in a dialogue with the council. And also thank you for the public who was here and expressing your fears, your desires, your concerns. It's very important for us to hear that, but also it's important for us to remain respectful of each other's time and space. And we appreciate you all for coming out and sharing all that you have tonight for everyone in this room and everyone viewing in at home. We appreciate that, and again, this is not the end. We want to continue this dialogue and working with the community and the police department on how we can continue to ensure that our residents feel safe and that our neighborhoods are safe, and also that our officers are as well. So again, thank you. And this has been, I think, a very informative night for all of us, and thank you. Meeting adjourned.